Chapter 720. That xuanhuan was still growing non-stop, and a few tree roots seemed to be unable to hold back as they pulled out from the ground and flew up. They danced wildly with the wind. The tree roots, which looked like they were filled with blood, swung wildly and emitted a frightening pressure. A thick, suffocating smell of blood spread out from within. It was also mixed with the smell of all sorts of rotting things. It was nauseating. Even though they were separated by a barrier, everyone could still feel it, and their expressions changed one after another. What exactly is down there? The thing inside those tree roots? Can't really be human blood, right? Yi Ranran couldn't help but mutter softly. Otherwise there's really no way to explain this bloody smell. But if that's really the case, it's too chilling. Who knows whose blood this is? Jiang Yuqing and the rest didn't say anything. They were all dragged down before, so they naturally knew what was down there. Qini said, "We can't stay here any longer. We have to leave immediately." As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Luiyue without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue didn't turn back, but he also knew what Qini meant, so he nodded and agreed. "That's right. This tree situation is very strange. If we stay here any longer, who knows what will happen." With that, she lifted her leg, intending to retreat again. However, Elder Qiushi immediately spoke up. "We can't leave. The third princess is still under that tree. If we leave just like that, what will happen to the third princess?" Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. For such a long time just now, he didn't think about this matter at all. Now that Dumpling belongs to me and I don't have any benefits to reap, he suddenly thought of it. Since Elder Qiushi cares so much, why don't you go down and take a look yourself? Elder Qiushi quickened his pace, rushed to Chu Luiyue and said coldly, "This red-tailed phoenix has been staying on this mother tree all this while. Now that it's become your fiend, it's naturally the most suitable for you to go down. Didn't you just say that with it around, this miasma isn't a problem for you?" Chu Luiyue knew that Elder Qiushi was shameless, but he didn't expect him to be so shameless as to say such words without batting an eyelid. Looking at his self-righteous expression, Chu Luiyue was so angry that he laughed. "What Elder Qiushi means is that you want me, the person with the lowest cultivation level here, to search for the third princess's whereabouts by myself. Aren't you thinking too highly of me?" However, Elder Qiushi refused to give up. "This divine beast is already yours. If you don't go, who will?" As expected, he's still holding a grudge about Dumpling. Chu Luiyue was well aware of the principle of treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Unfortunately, Dumpling was in an emergency at the time and had no way to avoid these people. It wouldn't be long before this matter would spread like wildfire. At this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from behind the crowd. They turned around and saw that the ground in the distance had suddenly collapsed. Countless withered trees fell down. A gigantic ravine instantly appeared. Also, the area of this collapse was still spreading. Very quickly, the same scene started happening in other directions. Uneasiness surged in Chu Luiyue's heart as he tipped his toes and flew up. When he saw the scene below clearly, even Chu Luiyue couldn't help but be shocked. The ground collapsed, and a ring-shaped ravine appeared with the mother tree as the center. The most important thing was that the area of the collapse actually started spreading outward. It was like an invisible wave that surged up continuously. The entire mystic forest actually started collapsing. The previously lush forest was now shrouded by the miasma and completely turned into a withered forest. The entire sky became dark once again. This time, it was different from the heaven and earth phenomenon that was caused when the nine-colored heavenly pheasant was about to break through. The entire place exuded a sinister and strange aura. Chu Luiyue then looked at the mother tree in the middle. Amidst the raging winds, all the trees were withering and being swallowed. Only this one was safe and sound and was even growing continuously. As Chu Luiyue looked at the vibrant green leaves, a guess suddenly flashed across his mind. Could it be that this mother tree is swallowing the other tree's strength? This thought made Chu Luiyue feel a chill in his heart. If I didn't guess wrongly, there should be a lot of people trapped under those trees like Jiang Yuqing, right? This current situation, xuanhuan is under this mother tree. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Web. Chapter 721. A white light flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. She already knew that xuanhuan must have a motive for purposely bringing so many people to the mystic forest. However, it was only now that Chu Luiyue finally understood what she wanted to do. She wanted to use these people's strength to recover her Yuan meridian and abilities. Many of the people who came had Daijing Yuan meridians, especially the disciples from the various clans. Almost all of them had Daijing Yuan meridians. After all, they were all the most outstanding seedlings selected from the various clans. Wanzheng competition. So this is what she's doing. She can't recover her yuan meridian, so she's targeting other people's yuan meridians? Although it sounded creepy, if this conjecture was true, then many of the things that had happened before had a reasonable explanation. Chu Liyue was horrified. She was the clearest about how vicious Xuanhuan was. However, she never expected that Xuanhuan would actually dare to do this. How many talented cultivators is she going to attack? She actually dared to? For a moment, many emotions surged in Chu Liyue's heart, and she didn't know what to say. Xuanhuan's yuan meridian was damaged by the fire in her Tianjing yuan meridian back then. This kind of injury was basically unrecoverable. This was because the power of the Tianjing yuan meridian was simply too strong. Even Chu Liyue herself couldn't think of a way to help Xuanhuan reconstruct her yuan meridian. However, since she did this, it meant that she definitely had a way. Even if it was such a despicable and sinister method. Liyu? What's wrong? Yuanran looked up slightly and asked worriedly. The expression on Liyue's face doesn't seem right. This sound made Chu Liyue return to her senses. She took a deep breath and landed back on the ground. Everyone turned to look at him. Chu Liyue said in a low voice, "We can't leave. I'm afraid we can't leave." A few creases appeared on Qin Yi's forehead. The entire mystic forest is collapsing except where we are. At the same time, underground. After Xuanhuan jumped down, after falling for a long time, she finally landed in the swamp again. She took out a water pearl and its faint glow illuminated the surroundings. Because she had been here once before, Xuanhuan wasn't afraid or worried this time. Instead, she was a little excited. She looked around and her gaze suddenly froze. Not far away, there was something emitting a dark green fluorescent light. That light looked a little cold and strange. Xuanhuan hesitated for a while but still decided to approach. After getting closer, Xuanhuan was surprised to find that there was a platform in the middle of the black swamp. The surrounding swamp surged, but there was one platform that remained unmoved. As for that dark green light, it was hanging above the platform. Suddenly, Xuanhuan seemed to have stepped on something. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked down and pulled out one of her legs. Below, a head was surging up along with the swamp. That's what I stepped on just now. Most importantly, this head wasn't made of white bones. It was a human head that hadn't had time to rot. It was a pale face with bulging eyes and deeply sunken cheeks. It looked like it died with a grievance. Xuanhuan felt disgusted and directly stepped on it again. When that thing was submerged by the black swamp again, Xuanhuan patted her chest, closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. Sure enough, the swamp below was flowing. When I dealt with this person just now, he seemed to be quite far away from here. I didn't expect to meet him again. Unlucky. Xuanhuan quickly left that place and ran forward. Very quickly, she reached the stairs at the edge of the platform. There weren't any barriers here, so she could easily come up. Xuanhuan shook off all the dirt on her body, before she looked at the ball of green fire again. It was really just a ball of fire. It was only the size of a palm and was quietly floating in the air. Xuanhuan was a little puzzled. What is this? Judging from its position, this thing should be directly below the mother tree. Suddenly, a tree root swung over from another direction. Xuanhuan was shocked and quickly bent down. However, the target of the tree root wasn't her, but the ball of fire. It flew over quickly but stopped in front of the ball of fire. A slender flame flew up and gently touched the tree root. The power contained in the tree root was continuously poured into the ball of fire. After a while, the tree root disappeared again. And the ball of fire was bigger than before. Xuanhuan's heart was beating wildly. So, the power that was devoured was finally poured into this. If I take this ball of fire for myself, then, wouldn't that power become mine? Thinking of this, her eyes lit up and she almost couldn't control the excitement in her heart. She took out a blood-red pill and quickly swallowed it. A moment later, the incomplete yuan meridian in her body seemed to have been stimulated by some kind of power and became alive again. The skin on her entire body had turned red. Black lines were faintly discernible. It looked very strange. She raised her foot and was about to step forward when she suddenly stopped. This thing might be dangerous. Xuanhuan's heart stirred and suddenly took out a set of armor. It was the pure gold sacred armor. She quickly put it on and took a step forward with a peace of mind. Digression. I feel like I'm writing a ghost story, facepalm. 6 o'clock. Since everyone said that they want to update at 20, then let's do it together. Every monthly ticket is a ladder to explosive updates. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 722. Taking a step forward, Xuanhuan clenched her fists nervously. After waiting for a while, nothing unexpected happened. Everything in the surroundings was still the same as before. Xuanhuan heaved a sigh of relief in her heart and continued to walk up. Wearing the pure gold sacred armor gave her more confidence in her heart. In the quiet and dark space, only the sound of the black mud and her own footsteps could be heard. Xuanhuan held her breath. Another tree root floated over. This time Xuanhuan had experience. She just stood there and waited. As expected, the tree root flew directly in front of the ball of fire. The faint green flame lightly twirled around it in a small circle. The power contained in it was quickly transferred into the ball of fire. Xuanhuan waited at the side. Soon the second tree root also left. That ball of fire had already become twice as big as before. Xuanhuan thought to herself. The power contained in this tree root seemed to be more abundant than expected. She waited for a moment and walked forward again. There was no cover around that ball of fire. When she was 3 steps away from that ball of fire, Xuanhuan was surprised to see that it was actually a burning rune. It was just that this rune looked very unfamiliar. Who left it here? Xuanhuan's heart was beating wildly. Then she stretched out her hand and slowly reached out towards that ball of fire. Just as her hand approached, that ball of fire suddenly rose up. It burned her hand fiercely. Hiss! Xuanhuan felt the pain and hurriedly drew her hand back. This thing didn't look special, but the temperature was extremely high. Xuanhuan lowered her head to take a look and realized that only half of her palm was burned. Because the pure gold sacred armor only covered half of her palm. The parts that were protected by the armor were intact, but the parts that were exposed were directly burned with huge blood blisters. It looked very horrifying. While Xuanhuan was surprised, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. So the power of this pure gold holy armor is really so powerful. She hadn't even used it yet. She was just wearing it, but its defensive power was already so strong. He really didn't know how strong this pure gold armor would be after it was fully awakened. Xuanhuan licked her lips, a trace of greed and excitement flashing in her eyes. She thought for a moment and decided to use both hands at the same time. His wrist was wrapped tightly by the pure gold armor. As such, as long as they didn't touch his exposed skin, he didn't have to worry about anything. Xuanhuan slowly reached out and hugged the ball of fire from the outside. From time to time, sparks would fly in all directions, but because they all landed on the pure gold sacred armor, Xuanhuan wasn't affected at all. Her eyes were fixed on the ball of green fire as she approached it bit by bit. Boom. All of a sudden the flame exploded. Xuanhuan turned pale with fright. Just as she was about to retreat, she found that the ball of fire suddenly flew towards her. Poof. That flame directly hit the position of her heart. Xuanhuan only felt as though there was a huge rock pressing on her chest, so heavy that she almost couldn't breathe. But this feeling disappeared in an instant. In an instant, it was as though something had forcefully passed through her chest and entered her heart. A scorching burning sensation came from her heart. Xuanhuan was extremely flustered. She didn't expect that ball of fire to enter her heart directly. With such a temperature, it wouldn't take long before her entire body would be burned to ashes. The painful burning sensation reminded her of that night in the royal family's ancestral hall. She had once thought that that was the most painful day of her life, but she didn't expect that this thing was also so torturous. Ah! Xuanhuan cried out in pain and fell onto the ground. She covered the position of her heart tightly with both hands, wanting to chase that ball of fire out. But immediately she felt that the thing had started to move. There was an intense pain in her abdomen. Xuanhuan's originally blood-red face turned slightly pale. The pain was really unbearable. She could only use both hands to hold the ground tightly and hit her head on the ground, wanting to faint and forget this pain. Clang! A dull sound was heard. However, she had forgotten that she was still wearing the pure gold sacred armor and her forehead was also protected. She couldn't even torture herself. But she didn't dare to really take off the pure gold sacred armor and could only endure it in the end. She didn't notice that during this process, the strange black patterns on her body were also undergoing subtle changes. After a long and incomparably torturous period, that terrifying pain finally lessened by a lot. Xuanhuan curled up on the ground, her entire body covered in cold sweat. Because her hands were scratching the ground with force, her hands were dripping with blood and her bones could be seen. Her lips were also bitten by herself, the blood was messy and unrecognizable. She panted heavily and finally found her reason with great difficulty. The pain on her body reminded her, she was still alive. Xuanhuan regained her senses and immediately began to check her body. In the end, she was stunned on the spot. Because that ball of fire actually landed in her dantian in the end. She was connected to the 5 treasures, so that ball of fire could spread from the flames to her dantian. Xuanhuan stared in a daze for a while before she discovered that that thing no longer had the appearance of a runic seal. Instead, it had completely turned into a fireball. It quietly floated in the center of her dantian, and that burning pain seemed to gradually dissipate. Ever since Xuanhuan's yuan meridian was destroyed, her core of essence was also damaged. Right now, the place where this dark green fireball was at was where her core of essence should be. A majestic energy suddenly surged out from that fireball and spread to her limbs and bones. The strange patterns on Xuanhuan's body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Not long later, those patterns seeped into her skin again. Everything happened too quickly. Xuanhuan didn't even have time to react before she felt that the yuan meridian in her body was completely wrapped in a layer of dark green light. Then, a rich energy flowed out from within. Xuanhuan suddenly trembled violently. My yuan meridian has been restored? As if to confirm her guess, another wave of energy surged out from the fireball in her dantian and spread along the dark green yuan meridian. Xuanhuan almost couldn't believe what was happening. She confirmed it again and tried again. When she discovered that the yuan meridian that was wrapped in the dark green light could smoothly circulate the energy in her body, Xuanhuan was finally sure that her yuan meridian had indeed been restored. The black patterns on her body had all dissipated, leaving only the space between her eyebrows. There was a final mark that looked like a strange black runic seal. At this moment, something suddenly appeared in her mind. She closed her eyes and carefully sensed it. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise. She could actually sense the location of everyone under Wan Yeshan's control in the mystic forest. As long as she wanted to, she could devour any of their energy. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 723. Upon closer inspection, she could even identify the identities of those people. There was the Black Cavalry and disciples from various sects. In addition, there were a few people that she did not recognize. They must have been swallowed after trespassing into the mystic forest. Xuanhuan never expected that this thing would bring her such a big surprise. Previously, she thought that she would choose a portion of these people to take action after arriving at the mystic forest. If something happened to everyone, it would inevitably arouse suspicion from outsiders. In addition, she had to make sure that she would not be discovered before she could take action. For example, when she was trapped in the enclosed space with more than 10 people. Everyone would think that those people were swallowed by the black swamp and would not associate it with her. After all, the mystic forest was full of dangers, and it was normal to encounter accidental deaths. With these conditions added together, the range of her actions was very small. But now it was different. As long as she wanted, she could quietly get rid of all these people. Xuanhuan checked the situation in her body again. The fireball in her dantian stopped after 2 streams of power surged out. Xuanhuan waited for a while, but it did not move again. She thought for a while and guessed that these 2 streams of power might have been swallowed by the 2 tree roots just now. And these were only enough to repair 1/10 of her yuan meridian. If she wanted to completely recover, she had to continue. And these trapped people, added together, it should be enough, right? When she thought that her yuan meridian could be successfully recovered, Xuanhuan was so excited that her body trembled slightly. God knows how long she had waited for this day. No one would know that she was the one who did all this. Therefore she could do it without worry. Perhaps, she could even take this opportunity to raise her level. Xuanhuan was extremely excited. Her eyes were scarlet as she began to choose among these people. First, she had to choose someone with a high-level yuan meridian. This way, she would be able to convert all the power contained in their yuan meridian into her own. It would also have the best effect on the recovery of her yuan meridian. Thinking of this, a figure suddenly appeared in Xuanhuan's mind. Right. Where's Chu Luiyue? Her yuan meridian was definitely one of the best among these people, right? Unfortunately, Xuanhuan couldn't find Chu Luiyue even after looking around. It must have not been devoured by Wan Yeshan yet. Xuanhuan was a little unwilling. She had disliked Chu Luiyue for a long time. If she could get rid of Chu Luiyue at the same time, it would be perfect. Forget it, recovering my yuan meridian is more important. Xuanhuan thought. In the distance, a certain sect disciple who had been trapped was about to break free, but the tree roots on his body suddenly sped up. It pierced straight into his chest. Ah! A short and hurried cry came from his throat, but it soon stopped abruptly. This was because the power in his body had been forcefully taken away by the roots. In the blink of an eye, his life was taken. He didn't even have time to react before he lost all signs of life. His eyes were wide open, his cheeks were sunken, and his entire body was curled up into a small ball. It was very strange. The same scene played out one after another in this dark space. The entire mystic forest was collapsing. This news gave everyone a huge shock. Even Qin Yi's expression turned serious. When Chu Luiyue saw his expression, he knew that they probably hadn't experienced such a situation before. Things were more troublesome than expected. Why did the mystic forest suddenly collapse? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. Chu Luiyue pointed at xuanhuan in the middle. Perhaps it's like what Big Brother Qin said before. It's because someone touched the seal. Jiang Yuqing fell silent. If we're talking about who's most likely to do this, xuanhuan is the most likely. After all, I went down from here just now. Besides, Jiang Yuqing knew what I was planning to do this time. Since that's the case, it seems like we have to go down this time. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he walked forward. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed. I'll take the lead. Chu Luiyue turned around and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, don't worry. Since I've already contracted the red-tailed phoenix, it should be the safest. Lei Laosi immediately said. How can that do? How can I let a young lady like you take the lead? Although Her Highness has a legendary fiend now, she's still a stage 5 warrior after all. Besides, Big Brother and I have been here for quite a long time, so we roughly know how to go down. I'm also very efficient. Lei Laosi finally thought of a reasonable reason. Since he had already said so much, it would be a little strange if he continued to push it away. Chu Luiyue followed his advice and took a step back. Then I'll have to trouble Big Brother Lei. Lei Laosi's hands trembled again. He really couldn't take Her Highness calling him Big Brother again and again. Lei Laosi hurriedly rushed to the front and arrived at the position where xuanhuan jumped down. This place was basically sealed off now. He held the hammer tightly with both hands, and his expression became serious and solemn. Everyone had already followed over one after another. Since they couldn't escape outside, the safest plan now was to stay together. Lei Laosi circulated the force in his body, and the aura around him surged crazily. Streaks of icy blue lightning swam around the hammer. A vast amount of pressure spread out from above. Then he shouted and smashed the hammer down harshly. Gale hammer. Violent winds blew instantly. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Bang. There was a dull sound. Chu Luiyue immediately felt the ground under her feet shaking. A crack appeared instantly. The force on the hammer kept spreading to the surroundings. The crack also rapidly expanded. The ground was quickly filled with cracks like a spider web. Boom. The ground in front of everyone collapsed again. A huge pit appeared in front of everyone. Lei Laosi jumped down first. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. Chang Wanzhou and the rest wanted to follow immediately but were stopped by Qin Yi's barrier. They turned around and saw that Qin Yi didn't seem to be in a hurry. He looked at Jiang Yuqing and the rest leisurely. Everyone please. Jiang Yuqing narrowed his eyes and didn't argue with him as he followed them. Elder Qiushi didn't dare to rush to the front or the back. When he saw that Jiang Yuqing and the rest had gone down, he then hurriedly chased after them. Mu Qinghe glanced at Qin Yi. I feel like I've seen this Qin Yi somewhere before. May I ask when you came to the mystic forest, young Master Qin? Qin Yi's eyes were open, and his lips curved up slightly. This is our private matter, so please forgive us for not being able to tell you. Also, Vice Admiral Mu, eldest young Master Jiang and the rest have all gone down. Aren't you going to follow them? Mu Qinghe suppressed her doubts, turned around and jumped down as well. Qin Yi smiled and then chased after them with Mu Hongyu and the rest. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 724. It was dark all around. The dark and cramped space was filled with a thick stench of decay and blood, and even the surrounding air seemed to have become sticky. Dumpling suddenly raised its wings. A red flame flew out instantly and streaked across the night sky like a shooting star, leaving behind a clear and bright line before finally disappearing into the abyss below. With the guidance of this flame, it was much more convenient for everyone to move forward. Lei Laosi, who was at the front, directly flew down. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. Everyone else also followed behind. Big Brother Lei, have you guys been here before? Chu Luiyue asked softly as he descended. Lei Laosi nodded. Once, but that was a very long time ago. Back then they had just arrived at the mystic forest and weren't very familiar with everything here, so they accidentally got into this trouble. Afterward, he relied on his big brother's help to get out of this godforsaken place. Since then, the two of them had basically been staying beside that mother tree to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Naturally, they didn't encounter such a thing again. Occasionally, someone would barge in from the outside, but they would be stopped at the periphery. Chu Luiyue and his group were the only ones who entered the depths of the mystic forest in the past year. I wonder if it's still the same as before, Lei Laosi mumbled. Chu Luiyue's heart moved and he asked again, "Oh right. Big brother Lei, I heard that the miasma in the mystic forest is actually white. Why is it that when we came here this time it was red? Also, it was mixed with a fishy and sweet blood stench, which made one very uncomfortable." Lei Laosi frowned. Speaking of this, actually Big Brother and I aren't too sure what's going on. When we first came, the miasma was indeed white. We didn't go out for a long time, and when we saw it again it was already red. But the color was still rather light then, and it gradually became darker until it became like this now. He was also curious at the start, but his big brother kept telling him not to bother about it. Their only motive here was to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Lei Laosi had always been obedient to Qin Yin, and with his carefree personality, he really didn't ask further. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. According to Lei Laosi's words, it was highly possible that the mystic forest only started to change after they came here. And the time they came here, Chu Luiyue speculated that they must have come here after her accident. It was even possible that Dumpling was brought here by them. Thinking of this, Dumpling suddenly glanced at her and turned her head. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Dumpling means that it wasn't brought here by Qin Yi and the other two? Then where did it come from? Chu Luiyue asked Dumpling again in his mind. Dumpling, did you come here on your own? Dumpling shook her head again. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes, but when he looked at Dumpling, his eyes revealed a trace of confusion. In actual fact, even it didn't know what exactly happened to its body. Back then, xuanhuan forcefully broke the contract with it before it lost its virginity. That was why it was able to survive. Originally, it wanted to perish together with xuanhuan and jianghu to take revenge for her. In the end, before it could do anything, it fainted. When it woke up again, its physical body was already left in the mystic forest, and its soul was split into two. Half was left in its physical body, and the other half entered a third-grade blood ferret. It didn't know what it went through in the middle at all. Dumpling's thoughts were clearly transmitted to Chu Luiyue. She thought for a long time and didn't say anything. It seems like someone helped me, but I don't know who that person is. Perhaps I can get something out of Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. However, now isn't a good time. Quickly look. There seems to be someone down there. Lei Laosi suddenly shouted. Chu Luiyue immediately suppressed the many emotions in her heart and looked in the direction Lei Laosi was pointing at. Sure enough, in that dim space there seemed to be a vague figure. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately increased her speed. However, when she gradually got closer, Chu Luiyue gradually knitted her brows. This person doesn't seem to be xuanhuan. Even if xuanhuan turned into ashes, I would still be able to recognize her. And this person down there, even though I can't see her face, that figure definitely isn't xuanhuan. However, Chu Luiyue only hesitated for a moment before she continued to rush down. Seeing that she actually overtook him, Lei Laosi hurriedly increased his speed and rushed over. What are those things down there? How can I let Her Highness rush to the front? However, Lei Laosi quickly realized to his shock that Chu Luiyue's speed wasn't any slower than his. In this space down there, all cultivators would be suppressed to a certain extent. However, Chu Luiyue doesn't seem to be. Perhaps it's because she contracted the red-tailed phoenix? Lei Laosi couldn't be bothered to ask more as he could only follow up at full speed. After a period of time, Chu Luiyue finally stopped. Lei Laosi arrived almost at the same time. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was about to walk toward that figure, he hurriedly said, "Wait. Hold on. It's dangerous." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "Don't worry. This person is already dead." Lei Laosi was taken aback as he walked closer. It was a young lady whose calves were stuck in the black mud, and most of her body was still outside. They saw the back view from above just now, so it was no wonder that they couldn't tell. It was just that her eyes were tightly shut and she wasn't breathing at all. She was indeed dead. Chu Luiyue raised her hand and snapped her fingers. A ball of fire appeared in her palm and instantly lit up the surroundings. And they finally saw that lady's face. Her face was purple and her cheeks were deeply sunken in. Her facial features were distorted, and she looked like she experienced extreme torture before she died. However, there was only a wound on her chest as if something directly pierced through it, and a large patch of blood stained the wound. Chu Liuyue's pupils constricted slightly. Lei Laoxi's expression also changed. How did this lady die so miserably and strangely? Who is this? The people at the back also followed one after another. Jiang Yuqing walked closer and could already tell that the lady wasn't Xuanhuan. Chu Liyue glanced at him. She's a disciple of the Nine-Star Alliance. In fact, this lady was the one who repeatedly mocked them previously. She was also the one who bullied Yi Ranran at Thousand View Garden back then. She was still arrogant and despotic when they saw her previously, but they didn't expect her to die in the blink of an eye. Jiang Yuqing walked to the two of them. When he saw that lady's face, his expression turned cold. Chu Liyue had been paying attention to him, and when he saw his reaction, he raised his brows slightly. How strange. Seeing this scene, Jiang Yuqing's first reaction wasn't shock or doubt. Instead it seemed like anger? Why does it seem like he's not surprised by this scene at all? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 725. This person isn't the third princess? Elder Qiushi also walked over with a shocked expression and couldn't help but blurt out. Isn't this directly below the mother tree? The third princess clearly came down from here just now. Why isn't she here? Jiang Yuqing said coldly, this black swamp is flowing. So much time has passed. She might have gone somewhere else. Elder Qiushi slapped his head. I actually forgot about this. If that's the case, wouldn't it be even more difficult to find the third princess? No one responded to him. Elder Qiushi finally felt a hint of awkwardness. At this moment, Mu Qinghe and the others also caught up. Yi Ranran saw the woman's face and exclaimed, Isn't this the new disciple of the Nine-Star Alliance? She had the deepest impression of this woman in the entire Nine-Star Alliance. She didn't expect to meet her again in such a situation. Chu Liyue nodded. That's her. How can it be? Didn't the Nine-Star Alliance people protect her? By the way, where are the other disciples of the Nine-Star Alliance? Yi Ranran muttered softly. He turned his head and looked around, but he didn't find any traces of anyone else. She seems to be the only one here. The other members of the Nine-Star Alliance aren't here. Chu Liyue shook her head. After confirming the woman's identity, she had already checked the surroundings. There was no one else around. Mu Qinghe sized up the woman and said in a deep voice, She probably separated from the others. She probably got separated from the others and came here alone. Then she was strangled to death by the rolling leaf fir's roots. Upon closer inspection, there were indeed signs of being tightly bound by something on her body. That one Yeshan is really scary. Yi Ranran had a lingering fear and a complicated expression on his face. Originally, he wanted to wait for a chance to find the Nine-Star Alliance to get revenge, but he didn't expect, now he had already guessed what had happened. Under those withered trees. Perhaps they were all trapped people. If that was the case, it meant that the 1,000 people who came to the Mystic Forest were all in such a situation. Just like this woman, there were countless people who had died here without a sound. Thinking of this, it was really chilling. She wasn't strangled to death by the tree roots. A clear and calm voice suddenly sounded. Everyone fell silent. Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Liyue. What did you say? Chu Liyue raised her chin. Her expression was nonchalant, but her gaze was very determined. If she was strangled to death by the tree roots, she shouldn't be like this. Mu Qinghe took 2 more steps forward, and with the help of the flame he could finally see more clearly. A hint of shock flashed across his eyes. After a moment of silence, he finally nodded. My eyes were playing tricks on me. She really didn't die for this reason. He had seen what it was like to be entangled to death by a rolling leaf fir. And this woman? Hers death was really too strange. What was even weirder was, Chu Liyue continued. The force in her body disappeared. Mu Qinghe pursed his lips. This was something he had just discovered. What do you mean? Mu Hongyu was comforting Yi Ranran and couldn't help but ask. Chu Liyue explained. After a normal cultivator dies, even if their life is gone, the force stored in their body won't dissipate immediately. Especially for this kind of talented person. There's definitely a lot of force in their flesh and bones. She should have died not long ago, but the force in her body is almost all gone. Chu Liyue's words attracted everyone's attention. As expected. Lei Laoxi's realm was high, so he was naturally more sensitive to these things. The force in her body seems to have been sucked away by something. It's completely gone. Wait. Her core of essence seems to be damaged too. Lei Laosi scanned the area with his force and had a horrified expression. Jiang Yuqing's eyelashes fluttered, and he lowered his eyes slightly. Chu Luiyue saw everything clearly from the side and sneered in his heart. It seemed that Jiang Yuqing was also very clear about what xuanhuan was doing. If he remembered correctly, this woman had the Daijingyuan meridian. It looks like something has devoured her power. Wan Yeshan is just a convenient tool, said Qini lightly. Everyone fell silent. Given the current situation, this was probably the only possibility. What is it? How could it be so cruel and terrifying? Yi Ranran was young and had never seen such a scene before. He was both frightened and angry. Elder Qiushi was worried. I didn't expect there to be such a terrifying thing in this place. We must find the third princess as soon as possible. Otherwise, the corners of Chu Liyue's mouth twitched ever so slightly. Elder Qiushi, don't worry. The third princess is blessed by the heavens. Even if everyone else is in danger, she will definitely be safe and sound. Elder Qiushi choked and felt that Chu Liyue's words sounded weird. However, he didn't know how to refute and could only fling his sleeves. Anyway, finding the third princess is the most important thing. Chu Liyue couldn't be bothered with him. Xuanhuan probably doesn't want us to find her yet. Help! Help! A hoarse cry for help suddenly came from afar. Chu Liyue found this voice very familiar and looked in the direction of the voice. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes. It's senior brother Zhu Hong's voice. It's actually someone from Dragon Teeth Mountain? Mu Hongyu was very worried and wanted to go over but was stopped by Qini. Once you leave this barrier, you'll be swallowed by this black swamp in less than 15 minutes. Mu Hongyu was shocked and stopped in her tracks with an anxious expression. But that's senior brother Zhu Hong? He's not the only one. Chu Liyue suddenly spoke up. There seemed to be quite a few people in that dark shadow. She gave Mu Hongyu a reassuring look. Don't worry, I'll go take a look. After saying that, he flew in that direction. Perhaps it was because of the red-tailed phoenix, but she was obviously much more mobile than the others here. Mu Hongyu nodded and stared intently. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed her. Help, cough cough. Help. The closer they got, the clearer Zhu Hong's voice became. He struggled with difficulty in the black swamp and even dragged a few unconscious people behind him. The surroundings were pitch black and his body kept falling. The energy in his body also kept flowing away. His entire body seemed to be gradually turning cold. A deep sense of despair surged into his heart. Am I really going to die here? When I came, I said that I had to take good care of the sect's disciples. But now, Zhu Hong's voice gradually became softer as he laughed bitterly. Who can hear me if I cry for help in this place? I've already exhausted all my energy and I really can't hold on anymore. Zhu Hong closed his eyes. Zhu Hong? A clear female voice suddenly rang out. Zhu Hong opened his eyes and tried his best to look forward. A silhouette was heading in this direction. The red light reflected her figure like a sharp blade that tore through the darkness, giving off a myriad of colors. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 726. For a moment, Zhu Hong thought that he was hallucinating. He closed his eyes and realized that the person didn't disappear. Instead, he was still coming over. I've seen this face before. Chu Liyue. Zhu Hong mumbled in disbelief. Chu Liyue was already in front of him. When he saw Zhu Hong's situation clearly, Chu Liyue's expression froze. Half of his body had already sunk into the black swamp, and he was dragging 4 people behind him. From the looks of it, they seemed to have fainted, and it was all thanks to Zhu Hong tying them together with a rope that they were not separated from each other. However, Zhu Hong's face was pale and he was barely breathing. He seemed to have exhausted all his energy and couldn't hold on any longer. Chu Liyue immediately reached out his hand. Zhu Hong, give me your hand. Looking at the fair and tender hand in front of him, Zhu Hong finally realized that this was really Chu Liyue. Zhu Hong reached out his hand in a daze. Lei Laosi hurriedly went forward, grabbed Zhu Hong's wrist, and lifted him up forcefully. How can I let His Highness do this? Lei Laosi was strong and had innate divine strength, so he easily dragged them out. Before Zhu Hong could react, he had already broken free from that terrifying swamp. Lei Laosi set up a barrier and surrounded the few of them. This way they wouldn't fall so easily again. Chu Liyue smiled and glanced at Lei Laosi. Thank you for your help, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi's eyes twitched. I haven't seen His Highness for such a long time. When did he become so fond of joking? When he heard him calling him big brother, his legs really turned to jelly. Why, you're welcome. It's what I should do. Lei Laosi coughed and turned his head away. Chu Luiyue teased him as her lips curled up slightly. Then she looked at Zhu Hong and the few people he brought along. They were indeed from Dragon Teeth Mountain. Chu Luiyue took out a bottle of pills and passed it to Zhu Hong. Replenish your energy first. Zhu Hong subconsciously raised his hand and received the elixir. He opened the cork and a rich fragrance wafted out. Zhu Hong was shocked. The level of this pill was not low, and the ingredients used to refine it were extremely precious. It was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to obtain even one pill, but Chu Luiyue actually had an entire bottle. Moreover, she gave it to him so casually, which showed how generous she was. Zhu Hong was a little embarrassed, but when he thought of his current situation, he only hesitated for a moment before choosing to accept. The pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth. A gentle force spread from his chest to his limbs and bones. Very soon, Zhu Hong's complexion became much better. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated expression. I really don't know how to thank you. When I came here, I originally wanted to help Chu Luiyue and the others. Who would have thought that in the end they would be the ones helping me? May I know who this is? He looked at Lei Laosi nervously. He was sure that this man was definitely not with them. However, his strength was extremely strong. Just by standing in front of it, one could feel the faint pressure. When did Chu Luiyue know such a powerful person? This is Big Brother Lei Laosi. We accidentally met him in the Mystic Forest and he helped us a lot. She then looked at Lei Laosi. This is Zhu Hong. He's in charge of leading the team to Dragon Teeth Mountain this time. Lei Laosi sized Zhu Hong up. Zhu Hong instantly became nervous. You little brat, you're quite loyal. Lei Laosi chuckled. That's right. You're a man. He could tell that Zhu Hong could totally escape by himself if he wanted to. However, he still chose to bring these few people along. This persistence was really hard to come by. Zhu Hong heaved a sigh of relief and smiled bitterly. We're all from the same sect, so this is what I should do. It's just that I'm useless in the end. If I didn't meet you guys, I'm afraid. Then he returned the jade bottle to Chu Luiyue. However, Chu Luiyue shook her head. You can keep this for now. Let's go to another place and feed it to them. There seemed to be a warm current surging in Zhu Hong's heart. His lips moved and in the end he only said 2 words seriously. Thank you. Chu Luiyue smiled. Let's go over there first. Hongyu is very worried about you guys. Hongyu is here too? Zhu Hong widened his eyes in shock. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly and was about to turn around. Biak. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Luiyue's expression froze and she looked up. A tree root that was as thick as an adult's waist suddenly swung over. It was very aggressive. It was extremely fast. Zhu Hong's expression changed. Run. This thing is dangerous. They were entangled by this thing just now and that's why they ended up in such a state. Chu Luiyue's gaze was cold as she swung her hand. A sharp dagger flew out. Zap. That tree root was actually split open from the middle by that dagger. The red juice instantly exploded. The bloody smell was so thick that it was almost suffocating. That tree root swung wildly as if it wanted to get closer. Chu Luiyue sneered. The next moment, 2 thin flying daggers suddenly flew out from the dagger. 2 consecutive sounds were heard. That tree root was actually cut off. Bam. 2 pieces of the tree root fell together. The swamp surged and quickly drowned it. Chu Luiyue raised her hand. The dagger flew back. The 2 flying daggers that were as thin as cicadas' wings had also quickly returned. It was clean and not a single mark was left on it. Chu Luiyue looked at it with satisfaction and put away the dagger. The entire process was smooth and smooth. Zhu Hong was dumbfounded. Just now, what did Chu Luiyue do? She actually managed to get rid of the berserk tree root so easily? Chu Luiyue took a deep look at that half of the tree root that had escaped and smiled. Let's go. At the same time, in another place, Xuanhuan groaned, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Her expression was shocked and angry. Her face was flushed with blood, and her expression was distorted. The strange black rune between his eyebrows also began to shake along with it. Someone actually managed to block her attack so easily. Those people were all geniuses with the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Originally they were already at her fingertips, but she didn't expect. Who is it? Xuanhuan gritted her teeth. Although her detection range was very wide and almost covered the entire mystic forest, there was one very important point. She could only sense the existence of those who were bound by Wan Yeshan. As for the others, she couldn't know. Therefore she couldn't guess who did it. However, there were a few people who were not in this range from the very beginning. Chu Luiyue and the group. Xuanhuan couldn't help but suspect Chu Luiyue, but she was a little uncertain. Because she didn't think that Chu Luiyue had such strength. Could it be? There were other powerful existences here that she didn't know? Xuanhuan was puzzled. However, she only struggled for a while and temporarily put this matter aside. If this group of people couldn't do it, then it would be fine to change people. The yuan meridian in her body had already recovered by a quarter. It wouldn't be long before it was completely healed. A faint green light flashed through Xuanhuan's eyes. Digression, 6 o'clock, torturing scum is very fast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 727. Chu Luiyue just turned around and was about to leave when Zhu Hong suddenly stopped him. Wait. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at him in confusion. What? Is there anything else? Zhu Hong frowned and hesitantly pointed in the direction they came from. Actually, when we came over just now we met a group of black cavalry. There were about a dozen of them and their situation wasn't optimistic. We were too far away back then so we missed them. I don't know how they are now. Chu Luiyue paused. You want us to go and help them? Zhu Hong looked hesitant. At first he didn't have this thought, but he saw that Lei Laosi was extremely powerful and Chu Luiyue's combat power wasn't to be underestimated, so he had this thought. He actually didn't have much to do with those black cavalry. He just felt that it would be a pity if they died just like that. However, he also knew that he was asking too much of them. In this godforsaken place, it was already very difficult for a person to protect their own life. How would they have the extra strength to help others? If he had this ability he would do it himself. Unfortunately, even he had to rely on Chu Luiyue and the rest to barely survive now. He already owed them enough, so how could he still ask them to do anything? No. Zhu Hong was silent for a while and finally shook his head. But just as he spoke, he was interrupted by Chu Luiyue. Where are they? What? Zhu Hong looked at Chu Luiyue in shock and couldn't react for a moment. When Chu Luiyue saw his expression, how could she not tell what he was thinking? There's also the Black Cavalry's Deputy General Mu Qinghe in our group, so it's reasonable for us to go and save them. As she spoke, she looked at Lei Laosi. Big brother Lei, please invite everyone over. We'll go together. Okay. Lei Laosi wasn't interested in this matter, but since Her Highness had this plan, he naturally wouldn't shirk from it. Lei Laosi turned around and quickly ran back. Seeing Lei Laosi's figure disappearing quickly, Zhu Hong finally returned to his senses and looked at Chu Luiyue in shock. You really want to go? Did Chu Luiyue not know how much energy it would take to save people in this place? Why not? The corners of Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Her eyes were clear, and there was a sense of valiance between her brows. These black cavalry soldiers were indeed led by Mu Qinghe, but at the end of the day they were once her soldiers. Xuanhuan wanted to use these people to seize their strength and seek a future for herself. He had to ask her if she agreed to it first. Zhu Hong stared blankly at the woman in front of him. She clearly had the appearance of a peerlessly beautiful young girl, and there was even a smile on her face. But for some unknown reason, her body actually carried a faint noble aura, as if she was looking down upon the world. For a moment, Zhu Hong felt extremely at ease. It was as if she would definitely be able to save everyone if she said she was going to save them. This kind of nobility and pride emitted from her bones definitely wasn't something that ordinary people could have. Didn't they say that Chu Luiyue came from an ordinary background? But from the looks of it now, it was very different from the rumors. Recalling how he said that he would take care of these people in Chongshu Pavilion, Zhu Hong's face flushed a little. All of them had probably underestimated Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi quickly brought the rest of the people over. When Mu Hongyu saw Zhu Hong and the rest in a sorry state, she was worried and hurriedly asked, Senior brother Zhu Hong, how are you guys? We're fine. Just now Luyu and Lei. Big brother Lei saved us and even gave us elixirs. We're fine now. When Zhu Hong saw that Mu Hongyu was safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. It's good that you guys are safe and sound. When we first saw that you guys were missing we were still rather worried. But from the looks of it now, those worries were unnecessary. From the looks of it, the few people who followed Chu Luiyue were clearly the safest. Mu Hongyu then heaved a sigh of relief. Other than Zhu Hong, the others were still unconscious and in a sorry state. But looking at Zhu Hong's appearance, he did seem to be much better. We had an accident back then. Forget it. All these aren't important. We'll talk about it in the future. The most important thing is that everyone is fine. Mu Hongyu looked at Chu Luiyue gratefully. Liu, thank you so much. Chu Luiyue smiled gently. Zhu Hong and the rest helped us previously, so it's only right for them to help us now. Zhu Hong was instantly embarrassed. Chu Luiyue isn't talking about the incident where he stood up for us at Pingliang Square, right? What kind of help can that be considered? Chu Luiyue saved our lives. Zhu Hong, you said that there's a portion of the Black Cavalry over there? Mu Qinghe directly asked in a deep voice. Zhu Hong's expression also became much more serious as he nodded. I did see some people just now, but I don't know if they're still there. But it hasn't been too long, so we should be able to find them smoothly. Mu Qinghe nodded. Then I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to lead the way. Vice Admiral Mu, you're welcome. Zhu Hong immediately said. After saying that, he lifted his foot and was about to walk in that direction. Stop. An impatient voice sounded. It was Elder Qiushi. His expression was very sour as he looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, are you really going to save those people now? Have you forgotten that our top priority is to find the third princess? If we all go to save the Black Cavalry now, what will happen to the third princess? If the important matter of finding the third princess is delayed because of this, Vice Admiral Mu, can you bear the responsibility? A trace of impatience and viciousness finally appeared on Mu Qinghe's face, which had never changed for the past 10,000 years. I never said that I wouldn't look for the third princess. But now there's no news of the third princess and there's no clue at all. Even if we look for her, where are we going to find her? As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, I naturally have the responsibility to save my own soldiers. Elder Qiushi has always been worried about the third princess. Why don't you look for her yourself? You, Elder Qiushi's face turned red and white. He was about to curse when he met Mu Qinghe's fierce and cold gaze. His heart trembled and he swallowed the rest of his words. If Elder Qiushi doesn't plan to look for the third princess yourself and wants to follow us, then please don't mention this again in the future. We know very well what we should do and what we shouldn't do. There's no need for Elder Qiushi to guide us. Mu Qinghe's words were very rude, and she didn't leave Elder Qiushi any face at all. Elder Qiushi had never been insulted in public like this before, and he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. He looked at Jiang Yuqing, but he saw that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to speak. Clearly he was also on Mu Qinghe's side. Elder Qiushi secretly hated him. Mu Qinghe had been very low-key for more than a year, especially because of her previous identity as the Empress Concubine's confidant. She was cautious in her words and actions. Because of this, Elder Qiushi felt that he was superior to Mu Qinghe. He didn't expect that when he became tough, he was still the same as before. Mu Qinghe looked at Zhu Hong. Please lead the way. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 728. Then, under Zhu Hong's lead, everyone moved forward together and rushed in the direction they came from. After being scolded, Elder Qiushi finally shut his mouth obediently. This time, everyone's ears could finally be at peace. Zhu Hong had fed each of them medicine, and it didn't take long for them to wake up one after another on the way. Luckily, their injuries weren't too serious. With the effects of Chu Liu's pills, they could barely keep up. After a period of time, Zhu Hong finally stopped, but his brows slowly furrowed. That was because there were only a few corpses left that were almost completely submerged. From their clothes and faces, they were indeed the Black Cavalry. However, the other people were nowhere to be found. Those people from before were all here. Why are there only these few left now? Muttered Zhu Hong. Mu Qinghe looked around, and her face was so cold that it seemed like there was a layer of frost on it. This black swamp is flowing much faster than before. Chu Luiyue and the others hadn't been here before, so they couldn't compare. However, the remaining people, including Jiang Yuqing and the others, all realized this after taking a closer look. As expected. Perhaps it's because of this that those people left this place? Guessed Zhu Hong. I just don't know how they're doing now. If they're still alive, everything will be fine. But if they're dead, it should be because of the movements caused by that mother tree. As Mu Qinghe spoke, she looked up ahead. That was the direction where the black swamp was flowing. After stopping for a while, he took the lead and walked forward. However, Chu Liue purposely slowed down and walked to Qin Yi's side. Big brother Qin, the seal you mentioned just now. What exactly is it referring to? Qin Yi lightly shook his head. I only know that there's a seal below, but I haven't seen it personally, so I'm not very clear about it. As he spoke, he glanced at Tuanzi calmly. Chu Liue's heart skipped a beat. What he means is, Dumpling might know a thing or two. Dumpling blinked. Chu Liue calmed down. It seemed that it did have some understanding. Dumpling, why didn't you tell me before? Chu Liue asked inwardly. Dumpling buried her head in her shoulder. Because it didn't want her to go. It had been here for a long time and had vaguely guessed something. There was probably something under the seal that was not to be trifled with. From the very beginning, it did not want Chu Luiyue to be involved in this matter. That was why he didn't say anything. Chu Luiyue patted its head with a slightly restrained expression. Dumpling had already broken through to become a divine beast now. To be able to make it so fearful, it was most likely not simple. And Xuanhuan? She vaguely felt that something was wrong. However, since they were already here, there was no way to retreat. They could only face it head-on. The group continued forward. They were very fast. After about half an hour, they finally seemed to hear some movement in front. Mu Qinghe immediately looked over and saw a group of faint figures. It was the Black Cavalry. However, the number of people seemed to be much more than what Zhu Hong had said earlier. At a rough glance, there were at least more than 100 people. Mu Qinghe was about to go over when she suddenly realized that there were tree roots tightly wrapped around those people. Especially those people outermost. Almost all of them were covered in scales and were on the verge of death. A few of them were even unconscious. She didn't know if they had fainted or... The tree roots seemed to be trying to separate them, but the soldiers were still hugging each other tightly. They continued to entangle with those crazy tree roots. This scene actually seemed a bit solemn and stirring. The people who followed all fell into silence. Looking at this scene, they couldn't hide their shock. Mu Qinghe's expression was terrifyingly cold. She immediately wanted to go forward. Vice Admiral Mu rushing forward rashly at this time, I don't think it's appropriate? Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. Mu Qinghe turned around. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. What are you trying to say? Chu Luiyue smiled and pointed at the spot where the roots were intertwined. As long as we get rid of this thing, we can naturally rescue them. Otherwise, it's just a waste of effort. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Luiyue for a while. The anger and impulse in her heart finally gradually suppressed. Chu Luiyue was right. In the current situation, they could only use their wits and not force. The scene just now had a huge impact on her. For a moment, she actually almost rushed forward. You have a way? Chu Luiyue nodded. Yes. A tree root flew over. Xuanhuan raised her hand and lightly drew on the tree root. The bright red liquid quickly seeped into her palm. Then it entered the dark green fireball in her dantian. The tempered power surged out from the fireball again and spread to Xuanhuan's limbs and bones. Sensing that another part of the Yuan meridian in her body had been restored, Xuanhuan let out a long sigh. The feeling of having power again was simply too satisfying. She already couldn't remember how long she had waited for this day. As long as she persevered for a while and devoured enough power, she would be able to recover completely. Xuanhuan flicked the tree root away and looked at her hands. Her skin had gradually returned to its normal color from its initial blood-red color. She believed that it wouldn't be long before she could. Suddenly, Xuanhuan's expression changed. Her chest trembled violently. Her legs went soft and she knelt on the ground. The pure gold sacred armor hit the stone platform and let out a muffled sound. Xuanhuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The net that she had carefully planned was directly cut off. That was more than 100 people. Originally, as long as she succeeded this time, she would basically be able to recover completely. But she was actually stopped by someone just like that. The energy in Xuanhuan's chest and abdomen went berserk, almost tearing her internal organs apart. Blood kept flowing out from her mouth and quickly dyed the ground red. Some even fell on the chest of the pure gold sacred armor. Who is it? I will cut you into pieces. Xuanhuan shouted herself hoarse. The corners of her eyes were scarlet and her face was filled with madness. Suddenly, the void in front of her trembled violently. Then, a colorful stream of light streaked across. A ball of scarlet flames wrapped in a vast aura attacked her glabella. Digression, 12 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 729. Xuanhuan was shocked and immediately retreated. At the same time, she set up a barrier in front of her. She didn't know if it was because of the fireball, but the barrier she set up now had a faint green color. Boom. That scarlet flame hit the barrier hard. A loud boom sounded. The barrier shook violently. Xuanhuan's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something. Half paralyzed on the ground, she looked at the scarlet flame that suddenly appeared with fear and anger. She was afraid that it would rush over in the next moment. Fortunately, the power of the barrier was much stronger than she had expected. After an intense battle, the crimson flame was intercepted. It was just that the color of the barrier seemed to have become lighter. However, Xuanhuan didn't notice this at this moment. When she saw that the scarlet flame was unable to break through the barrier and finally retreated, She finally let out a long breath. It seemed that the power she had devoured during this period of time was still useful. But where did that scarlet flame come from? Xuanhuan supported her body and stood up with difficulty. She took a step forward and stared at the flame. Such a strong and bright red color. She seemed to have seen it before? And that flame was also floating quietly in the air. It didn't move forward or backward. This made Xuanhuan have the illusion that she was being stared at. She felt uncomfortable all over. She clenched her teeth and wanted to get rid of that flame. But at this moment she had just dodged that attack with great difficulty. If she rashly faced it head-on, she wasn't sure what would happen. She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. There were some bloodstains on the pure gold sacred armor. This flame, that's right. Xuanhuan's eyes suddenly lit up. Wasn't Chu Liyue's flame the same color? Could it be that Chu Liyue made a move? No. Impossible? Xuanhuan frowned again. Chu Liyue was here. It was already a problem whether he could protect his own life. How could he give her such a blow? She looked at the ball of flame again and her gaze suddenly froze. Within the flames there seemed to be a blurry figure. She stared at him carefully without blinking. Suddenly she sucked in a breath of cold air. The thing inside seemed to be a 9-colored heavenly pheasant. No. It looked a little different from the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. And the pressure was even stronger. Just as Xuanhuan was guessing, the figure in the flames suddenly raised his head. Then he opened his eyes. A brilliant rainbow light flashed past. Xuanhuan's heart skipped a beat. She reacted almost immediately and rushed forward. His origin power transformed into a sword and stabbed out viciously. However, that ball of scarlet flames instantly exploded. Bang! In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. It really was her. Chu Liyue opened her eyes and a cold, murderous intent flashed across her eyes. Although it was only a glance, it was enough for her to recognize that it was indeed Xuanhuan. She looked a little different from before. Although her appearance and figure were still the same, the expression on her face, there seemed to be something wrong with it. In addition, the black rune between her brows looked extremely strange as well. What made her feel the most disgusted was that Xuanhuan was actually wearing the pure gold armor. Chu Liyue pursed her lips tightly and her face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. She had obtained the pure gold armor by accident back then and had always treasured it. She didn't expect that Xuanhuan would take it for her own. "Liyu, how is it? Did you find out anything?" Mu Hongyu's voice pulled Chu Liyue back to her senses. She closed her eyes and looked up. Her eyes were clear and calm. She nodded. "That seems to be the middle of the swamp. There's a person there but I can't see who it is." "It's already very impressive to be able to find out this much." Mu Hongyu sighed. Chu Liyue smiled and patted Dumpling who was on her shoulder. "It's all thanks to Dumpling." She had finally persuaded Dumpling to help just now. It was now a mythical beast and had stayed here for more than a year, so it definitely knew more about everything here than they did. As expected, Dumpling directly found Xuanhuan's location. As for her, because she had a contract with Dumpling and their minds were connected, she could easily see everything that Dumpling had found out. Xuanhuan was very vigilant. For safety, she didn't let Dumpling stay for too long and quickly retreated after taking a glance. She didn't leave any clues for Xuanhuan. Recalling Xuanhuan's ferocious expression when she suddenly came back to her senses, Chu Liyue sneered in her heart. After doing so many dirty things in secret, Xuanhuan was naturally more guilty than anyone else and was more afraid of being discovered. Even if she was the high and mighty third princess of the Tianling dynasty, she definitely wouldn't be able to survive if this matter was spread out. Using such a despicable and insidious method to devour other people's forces and take their lives, just to help herself recover her cultivation. Once such a behavior was exposed, what awaited Xuanhuan was the cursing of thousands of people and the punishment of never being reincarnated. Of course she was afraid. At this moment Xuanhuan was probably panicking, right? Thinking of this, Chu Liyue's mood improved a lot. She looked at Mu Qinghe. "Vice Admiral Mu, how are the soldiers?" Mu Qinghe had just distributed the pills to the last batch of black cavalry. Hearing this, he raised his head and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated expression. 4 of them can't make it and 21 of them are seriously injured. The rest are fine. A black cavalry soldier standing at the front suddenly lowered his voice and said, "That's right. Miss Chu, my name is Tian Zhuangzhuang. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. I, Tian Zhuangzhuang, will definitely not shirk my duty." He didn't say which squad he belonged to in the black cavalry. He only said his name. This meant that he was expressing his gratitude personally. Chu Liyue's eyes curved. Me too. Miss Chu, I'm Zhou Kaiyun. We owe you our lives, so we'll do whatever you say in the future. As Zhou Kaiyun spoke, he secretly glanced at Mu Qinghe and scratched his head at Chu Liyue in embarrassment. Of course, that's when we're not wearing the black cavalry armor. When they wore the armor, they didn't have a name and only had the title Black Cavalry. Obeying military orders was a soldier's duty. The Black Cavalry, especially the ones led by Mu Qinghe, had always been strict with military orders and followed them to the letter. But when they took off their armor, they were themselves. Those who could fight their way out of Da Huang Swamp were all iron-blooded good men. How could they not repay a favor? I Jiang Mingshan too. Me too. And Xinji. And voices rang out one after another. The deep and powerful voices reverberated, as if they wanted to tear apart this dark and cramped space. Chu Liyue felt something surging in her chest. She knew. She always knew. These people. She took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. I understand everyone's intentions. This is actually a small matter, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Those who need to recuperate stay behind. The rest will go together. When this is over, we'll look for you again and return together. Chu Liyue pacified the soldiers with a few words. Those who should stay all consciously stood on the other side. As for the large group who were about to leave after hearing Chu Liyue's words, they all stood together with high morale. Mu Qinghe looked at this scene and was secretly shocked. Chu Liyue and these soldiers had only just met, but she could already easily make them obey her. She seemed to have some kind of inexplicable aura that could make people unconsciously listen to her and do as she said. Honorable, dignified, but also full of affinity. Without batting an eyelid, she controlled the entire scene. She was like a natural superior. Even if she was only a teenage girl and came from an ordinary background, she did not feel the slightest bit out of place when commanding so many people. It was as if it was supposed to be like this. Mu Qinghe had fought her way up from the bottom, so she knew the temperament of these soldiers best. They had seen countless life and death situations. Their flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were almost all tempered. On the surface they looked well behaved, but in fact they were very stubborn. Chapter 731. Actually, there were still quite a number of people left who could do it. For example, the disciples from those sects were almost all extremely outstanding geniuses. Needless to say, the Daijing Yuan Meridian was middle grade or even high grade. Xuanhuan checked around and quickly chose someone. The Yuan Meridian in her body had already recovered by more than half. She only needed a few more times to succeed. This made Xuanhuan feel much more at ease. As long as she could complete this task, nothing else mattered. She licked her lips and the dark green light in her eyes flashed again. However, she didn't know it herself. Just as she held her breath and was about to make a move, a strange sound suddenly came from behind her. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately looked back vigilantly. At the same time she waved her force. At this moment her force had already turned into a light green color. It transformed into a sharp blade in midair and quickly swept over. Crack. The sound of something shattering was heard. She focused her eyes and only then did she see that when the black swamp surged, a ghastly white skeletal hand had floated out. Her attack just now had directly cut off the hand bone. The mud churned and quickly swallowed the bone and disappeared. Phew! Xuanhuan patted her chest and let out a breath with lingering fear. She thought that that thing had come to spy on her again. She turned around, intending to concentrate and do it again. A bright scarlet flame suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Ah! Xuanhuan screamed and immediately retreated. At the same time she set up the barrier again. However, this time the red flame didn't come forward again. It just floated there quietly. However, this made Xuanhuan even more flustered. As expected, someone was spying on her in the dark. She was flustered and furious. She immediately went forward to get rid of that thing. However, a rainbow-colored light flashed and the flame disappeared again. Took another look. Xuanhuan was so angry that her liver hurt. Her chest and abdomen were suffocating, as if they would explode in the next moment. The other party was extremely cunning, appearing so suddenly and disappearing so quickly that Xuanhuan had no time to react, let alone do anything. Xuanhuan was still angry for a while. She gritted her teeth and decided to solve the problem of her Yuan Meridian first. However, her state of mind had been completely disrupted by that ball of flame. Devouring energy to reconstruct the Yuan Meridian was an extremely exhausting task. Right now, Xuanhuan's heart was in a mess and her mind was in a mess. She couldn't do anything at all. She was so angry that she paced back and forth on the platform. The boots of the pure gold armor made a sound on the ground. Tap, tap, tap. It was cold and crisp, but it also carried a trace of heavy pressure. Patter. Something seemed to have sunk. Xuanhuan looked down, her eyebrows furrowed tightly. The bloodstains on the pure gold armor were slowly condensing into blood droplets before dripping onto the ground. That sound just now was the sound of blood dripping down from the arm that had accidentally rubbed against it. Xuanhuan's heart skipped a beat. She then looked at her chest and realized that the situation was the same here. These were all intentionally or unintentionally done by her. At first she didn't pay much attention to it, but now, why does it seem like something is wrong? After the bloodstains dripped down, the pure gold armor was still clean and neat. It didn't look like it had been stained with blood before. Could it be that this pure gold armor is originally like this? Xuanhuan muttered in a low voice. She had only seen Xuanhu wear this pure gold armor before. It was her first time wearing it, so she didn't know much about it. There were actually many traces of battle on it, but there were no bloodstains. Perhaps it was really because this pure gold armor wasn't stained with blood, Xuanhuan thought to herself. When she thought that someone was secretly watching her, she became frustrated again. The other party was watching her so closely. Could it be that they had discovered something? And every time she wanted to try again, that fireball would suddenly appear. This made Xuanhuan uneasy. She couldn't concentrate on repairing her yuan meridian. After a long time she still didn't find anything. Just as Xuanhuan was at her wit's end, the black rune in between her brows suddenly floated down and swayed in front of her eyes. Xuanhuan's pupils shrank. A trace of deep fear flashed across the depths of her eyes. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded from the rune. "Are you so useless?" That voice was low and hoarse. It was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman, but it instantly made Xuanhuan's face turn pale. Who are you?" A low laugh came from the rune, containing undisguised mockery. "Don't you know who you relied on to be where you are today? Why, you don't want to admit it now." After her guess was confirmed, Xuanhuan's face instantly turned even uglier. All along she knew that there was a mysterious existence in her body. She had heard this voice before. But only twice. The first time was many years ago. It was also that time that made her want to kill Xuanhuan. She had made up her mind to snatch everything from her. The other time was the night Xuanhuan died. At that time, her yuan meridian had been completely destroyed by Xuanhuan. It was this voice that had appeared and told her how to restore her yuan meridian. It was not that Xuanhuan was not afraid. But she also yearned for jianghu. She wanted to obtain power and authority. She wanted to obtain everything that Xuanhuan once had. Therefore she had always obeyed this voice. She didn't expect that it would appear in such a form today. Countless guesses flashed through Xuanhuan's mind as she looked at the strange black rune. She tried her best to calm herself down, but her body was trembling violently. You. So it's really you. Please forgive me for not noticing it just now. Slap. It was as if an invisible hand had slapped Xuanhuan hard on the face. The crisp sound of a slap instantly rang out. Xuanhuan fell hard to the ground. Her helmet was also thrown off. Half of her face instantly became red and swollen. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. "You're getting bolder by the day to play tricks in front of me." The voice in the rune was cold and sinister. Xuanhuan struggled to stand up. "I didn't." Slap. This time, it was the other half of her face that was slapped. Digression, 6 a.m., mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 732. Xuanhuan fell heavily to the ground again. Her hairpin was knocked to the ground, and her hair was scattered messily. This time she was hit until she saw stars and her vision turned black. She opened her mouth, and her lips and teeth were filled with a strong smell of blood. All she spat out was blood. Her entire face was numb. After a short pause, the intense pain surged up like a tide. But this was not as strong as the deep fear that suddenly erupted in her heart. She knew that this mysterious person was very strong, but she didn't know that he was so terrifying. She had been easily dealt with. One had to know that her current strength was almost at the early stage of a stage 8 warrior. But when the other party attacked, she didn't even have time to react. She could only be beaten. These two slaps completely made Xuanhuan aware of the gap between her and the other party. "Now, are you willing to tell the truth?" That voice sounded faintly, like a demon's voice echoing in her ears. Xuanhuan's heart trembled violently. She curled up and knelt with her head lowered. This junior knows her mistake. This time she didn't dare to play any tricks. She could only obediently lower her head and admit her mistake. Please give this junior another chance. If you have any orders, this junior will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. In the past 2 years, Xuanhuan had never knelt to anyone, let alone begging in such a humble tone. Father was in a coma and she was the ruler of the Tianling dynasty. She was second only to one person and above all. So kneeling at this time made her feel quite ashamed in her heart. But she didn't dare not kneel. Her little life was in the other party's hands. If you had done this earlier, wouldn't there have been so much trouble? The black rune swayed gently and sneered. Xuanhuan didn't dare to move. Your Yuan meridian has long been damaged by the Tianjing Yuan meridian. Logically speaking, it can't be repaired. It was me who gave you a chance to live. Now the opportunity is in front of you, but you are so useless. You are indeed mud that can't support a wall. That person's tone was slow, but there was an air of superiority. Every word was very straightforward, not leaving any face for Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan's face turned red and white, but she didn't dare to refute. Senior, please guide me. Xuanhuan was not stupid. She knew that the other party must have come for her Yuan meridian. Sure enough, the man continued. Your position has already been discovered. There's no point in running. You might as well make use of the time to heal your Yuan meridian. After you find the target, I will help you set up a barrier so that no one will disturb you. As long as you stay calm, everything else is not a problem. Xuanhuan was a little hesitant. But, Senior, there must be someone who knows what I'm doing now. If the news spreads, so what if I know? As long as you don't bump into them on the spot, no one can do anything to you. Don't forget who you are. She woke Xuanhuan up with a start. Her heart shook as she suddenly understood what was going on. That's right. She was the third princess of the Tianling dynasty. As long as no one saw her with their own eyes, who could force her to confess? If she was really exposed in the future, wouldn't it be fine if she denied it? When Xuanhuan died, the entire Tianling dynasty was shaken. Countless people suspected the cause of her death, and some people even almost found out that she and Jiang Yuqing were involved, but didn't they solve the problem safely in the end? Thank you for your advice, Senior. No need to thank me. I have my own reasons for helping you. I'll give you 15 minutes. If you still can't do it, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. Yes. Xuanhuan didn't dare to ask any more questions. She quickly sat cross-legged and began to look for a suitable person. The black rune floated back between her eyebrows. In fact, this process didn't feel anything, but Xuanhuan felt that there was something extra on her forehead, and it was very uncomfortable. She held her breath and closed her eyes. As she looked for someone, she thought to herself, this black rune. Actually, even she herself did not know when it had entered her body. All these years, other than the 2 times it took the initiative to speak, it almost didn't exist. Xuanhuan was vaguely worried, but she had always tried her best to ignore this matter and forget its existence. She didn't expect it to suddenly appear today. Moreover, it appeared in such a strange way. Don't try anything funny. Otherwise, your fate will be even more miserable and pitiful than you can imagine. The voice sounded coldly in her mind. Xuanhuan shivered and responded. Then she forced herself to retract her thoughts. The entire mystic forest, except for the area where the mother tree was, had completely collapsed. As a result, all the people who were trapped underground followed the black swamp and flowed towards them. Xuanhuan roughly checked and was suddenly surprised to find that the number of people she could sense was much less than before. It seemed that there were fewer people from the Black Cavalry and a small number of disciples from the sect. She felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. After wasting so much time just now, it was no wonder that there were fewer people. With so many people, there would definitely be people who could break free. Especially those who were in groups, their strength was extremely strong when they were united. If she didn't use some special methods, it would be difficult to keep them. Just like the 100 or so Black Cavalry from before, she had spent a lot of effort to trap them. She didn't expect that in the end. Xuanhuan took a deep breath and found a good target. It was those people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. What Xuanhuan didn't know was that during the period of time when she didn't do anything, Chu Luiyue and the others met several groups of people and gathered them all. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and a small number were disciples from the sect. Fortunately, other than one of the disciples from Dragon Teeth Mountain who had died, the rest were all found. Although they were all injured to different extents, they persevered and kept up after some simple treatment. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Zhu Hong. At that time he was the first to discover that Mu Hongyu had left. He had planned to bring people to look for her, but something happened to Jiang Yuqing. He made a prompt decision and dragged everyone from Dragon Teeth Mountain together. When they fell into the swamp in the end, they were still together. It was only later that he was unable to hold on and split into two groups. However, the distance between them wasn't very far. Other than that, there were also disciples from Holy Flame Palace and Tianji Mansion who were found along the way. Roughly speaking, there were more than 300 people in this group. Including a small number of people who had to stay in place because of their serious injuries, there were almost 400 people. Unknowingly, Chu Luiyue had become the backbone of the group. After all, only Chu Luiyue knew how to find the mastermind behind all of this. In addition, she had contracted a divine beast, which attracted countless envy and admiration from the crowd. Even Jiang Yuqing, who had the highest status, had a slightly inferior presence. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked ahead. There's someone ahead. I'll go take a look first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 733. Everyone stopped in unison and waited for Chu Luiyue. Along the way, they were almost used to doing this. Chu Luiyue would take the lead to investigate whenever they encountered any situation. After confirming the specific problem, they would act according to Chu Luiyue's instructions. At first, some people weren't convinced. After all, Chu Luiyue's slender figure and overly beautiful face really didn't look like someone who could do such things. But after Chu Luiyue led them to avoid a few attacks and saved even more people, such doubts gradually disappeared. All of them followed obediently. Lei Laosi followed as usual. Chu Luiyue glanced sideways and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, you don't have to follow me every time. We're so close. Even if something really happens, I can handle it. Lei Laosi paused for a while before speaking in a low voice. It's always good just in case. Her Highness is capable. But in this world, an accident that can be predicted isn't an accident anymore. Back then, Her Highness was only one step away from becoming a Stage 9 warrior. How valiant was she? What happened in the end? She was still framed by a traitor and died in a sea of fire. Back then, the 13th Yu sect was too trusting of Her Highness, so others took advantage of her. Now that it happened again, they definitely wouldn't let such a thing happen a second time. Chu Luiyue looked at the stubborn Lei Laosi and felt warmth in her heart. Thank you, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi coughed uncomfortably. He looked up unintentionally and vaguely saw a few people. They looked like a few young people, and the one at the front looked a little familiar. Who is that? Chu Luiyue followed his line of sight and looked over. Then she smiled. Isn't this Purple Shao Sword Sect Song Qingyan? There were 3 people beside him and Yang Qin was one of them. At this time, Song Qingyan had just cut off the tree roots that wrapped around him and was about to help the others. When he heard the commotion, he immediately turned around vigilantly. Who is it? He first saw Lei Laosi in front and was secretly shocked. This unfamiliar man is extremely powerful. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Lei Laosi had already recognized Song Qingyan, but he still had to pretend that he didn't. He sized up Song Qingyan and sneered. You don't have to do this. If I want to attack you, none of you can stop me. Song Qingyan frowned and was about to speak when he saw Chu Luiyue walking up from behind him. Big brother Lei, I know these people. Don't scare them. Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Lei Laosi scoffed softly and crossed his arms, having no intention of helping at all. He had no interest in saving the people of the Purple Shao Sword Sect. Chu Luiyue? Why is it you? Song Qingyan was still wary of Lei Laosi, and his gaze toward Chu Luiyue was filled with doubt. She looked fine, as if she wasn't injured at all. He had sacrificed so many treasures and barely managed to hold on until now, but he still looked much worse than Chu Luiyue. There must be something wrong with her. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across these people. Song Qingyan was still fine. Other than some bloodstains on his body, he was basically uninjured. After all, he was the young master of the Purple Shao Sword Sect, and he would have many protective treasures on him. The others, on the other hand, were a little more miserable. However, Yang Qin seemed to be fine too. Chu Luiyue suddenly recalled that Song Qingyan seemed to be hugging Yang Qin in his arms just now. She smiled. Young Master Song, don't worry. We were passing by here and came over after hearing the commotion. We didn't expect to meet you guys. We wanted to see if we could help, but it seems like we don't need to anymore. Song Qingyan sized up Chu Luiyue suspiciously and frowned. Help us. You. His words were filled with undisguised contempt. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Fine. Since he already said so, why should she stick her warm face to his cold butt? It seems like young Master Song doesn't think highly of us, so we won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, she turned around and left decisively. Lei Laosi chuckled and immediately followed her. Her Highness's personality seemed to have changed a little compared to before. If it were in the past, Her Highness would at least talk more with Song Qingyan on account of the Purple Shao Sword sect. But now, she turned around and left without saying anything. Awesome. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Lei Laosi really left so decisively, Song Qingyan was stunned. What exactly does this mean? Looking at the two of them leaving, Song Qingyan frowned, and anger rose in his heart. A mere Chu Luiyue actually dared to throw such a look at me. My Purple Shao Sword sect doesn't need anyone's help at all. Let alone Chu Luiyue? What a joke. Did she think that she could intimidate others just because she called an unknown powerful figure over? He retracted his gaze in disgust and pulled Yang Qiner, who was closest to him, up before cutting off the tree roots on her body. Qiner, you shouldn't be so weak. Is there something wrong with your body? Song Qingyan asked casually. Yang Qiner's face tightened, and she instinctively moved her wrist back. As the surroundings were dark, Song Qingyan didn't see the change in her expression. Oh, maybe I'm tired from the long journey? Also, I met a bottleneck in my cultivation recently, so... Song Qingyan didn't really suspect anything, so he believed her after hearing what she said. It's fine. With me around, I'll definitely protect you. Yang Qiner looked at him gratefully and thanked him repeatedly. Song Qingyan was in a great mood from her admiring gaze, so he threw Chu Luiyue's matter to the back of his mind. Then he made a move again, planning to pull the remaining two people up. We have to get out of this damn place as soon as possible. Before he finished speaking, a cold wind suddenly came from the darkness. Swoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Several thick tree roots were thrown towards the few of them at the same time. Song Qingyan knew that this was bad and immediately pulled Yang Qiner into his arms. Then he dodged backward. With his move, the remaining two people who hadn't been pulled out of the swamp were tightly entangled by the tree roots. Save. The short cry for help came to an abrupt end. Crack. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The tree roots actually wrapped around their necks and twisted violently. Their heads were tilted in a strange posture, and their eyeballs protruded. Not long after, they completely stopped breathing. Chu Luiyue turned around with a sharp gaze. She tapped her toes and immediately flew over. At the same time, she raised her wrist, and a ball of scarlet flames transformed into a fire whip, quickly wrapping around the tree roots. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue shouted. Dumpling's wings flapped and a colorful stream of light flew out. It intertwined with the scarlet flames. The flames directly drilled into the tree roots and spread all the way. Ah! The boiling temperature caught xuanhuan off guard and she screamed. A ball of flames flew over. Swoosh. It actually directly penetrated the barrier and pounced toward xuanhuan. Xuanhuan subconsciously injected her force into the pure gold armor. However, not only was the pure gold armor not activated, but it also repelled all her power. A look of deep shock flashed across Xuanhuan's eyes. The pure gold armor, and it even had an owner. Digression. Today is the last day of June. Those who have tickets, please don't forget to vote. The tickets will be voided tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Could it be, because the last bit of origin power in her body hadn't fully recovered? She turned her head to take a look. The few tree roots that he had sent out earlier had all been burned. It wasn't easy for him to find the right opportunity to kill the two Purple Shao Sword sect disciples. However, before he could devour their strength, he had already. Xuanhuan was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. This person definitely did it on purpose. And this ball of fire, she looked at the ball of fire coldly and resentfully. In the center of the red flame, there was a gorgeous colorful stream of light that was also dancing. It seemed to be monitoring and also provocation. You guessed right. This is indeed Chu Luiyue's power. That hoarse voice sounded again. Xuanhuan's heart sank. She couldn't help but frown. But the power contained in it is clearly stronger than Chu Luiyue. I'm not done yet. That voice lazily interrupted Xuanhuan. Other than her, there's also the red-tailed red phoenix, which is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was about to break through at the beginning. What? Xuanhuan widened her eyes in shock. This? You mean, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant has successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix, and Chu Luiyue? Chu Luiyue was able to move together with the red-tailed red phoenix. It was self-evident what it meant. This Chu Luiyue's luck isn't ordinary. A divine beast like the red-tailed red phoenix is extremely arrogant. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't form a contract with a human, especially with a mere stage 5 warrior. That voice had a layer of coldness. It was obvious that it was also very surprised by this matter. Hey, you worked so hard, but in the end it was all for someone else. These words were full of ridicule. Xuanhuan was already in deep shock. Being ridiculed like this made her feel even worse. Her hatred for Chu Luiyue also deepened. She had only jumped down to repair her Yuan meridian. How long had it been? Yet Chu Luiyue had taken the initiative. Divine beast. That was a real divine beast. She hadn't even seen it before. In the blink of an eye, Chu Luiyue had already formed a contract with it. Bitch. It's useless to say this now. Even if a divine beast's soul is destroyed, it won't recognize a second master. You don't have to think about this anymore. Besides, Chu Luiyue has probably guessed what you're doing now. The most important thing now is to repair your Yuan meridian and leave this place. Thank you for your guidance, senior. Xuanhuan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty. However, deep in her heart, she was still brooding over this matter. The black patterns on the barrier suddenly scattered. Like a drop of ink dripping into water, the entire barrier was quickly dyed black. Xuanhuan's figure was gradually covered by the barrier. She thought to herself. Chu Luiyue must be with the people from the Purple Shao Sword sect now. Since that was the case, she could just find someone else to attack. She didn't believe that Chu Luiyue could really stop her. Xuanhuan sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Unconsciously, she glanced at the pure gold armor lying quietly on the ground again. Uneasiness rose in her heart. When she was fully recovered, she must take the pure gold armor for herself. The black runes fluttered gently. An invisible ripple flew towards the ball of flame. Boom. The flame exploded. Even the roots of the tree were blasted away by the explosion. Chu Luiyue quickly retreated. Dumpling flapped her wings and a hurricane suddenly appeared. All of the chaotic energy was blocked. After a series of explosions, the entire space finally quieted down. Chu Luiyue frowned. Someone was helping Xuanhuan. Unfortunately, the other party acted too quickly. She couldn't see it clearly. The key was that this person was extremely powerful. Even Lei Laosi might not be the other party's match. When did Xuanhuan have such a mysterious and powerful helper? A sobbing sound came from behind. Chu Luiyue turned around. Yang Qin'er was covering her face and crying in front of the two disciples who were already dead. She seemed to be very sorrowful. It's all my fault. Senior brother, you shouldn't have saved me first. Song Qingyan was also upset because of the loss of these two disciples, but when he heard Yang Qin'er crying like that, his heart immediately ached. How can I blame you? You were the closest to me back then. Who else should I save if not you? Yang Qin'er sobbed as she looked at him pitifully and innocently with her red eyes. If Miss Chu had taken action earlier, perhaps it would have been different. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 735. Upon hearing that, Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and turned around. Miss Yang, what do you mean by that? Yang Qin'er glanced at Chu Luiyue. Her heart skipped a beat when she met his dark jade-like eyes. She quickly looked away as if she was on fire. She took half a step back as if she was frightened by Chu Luiyue's appearance. Miss Chu, don't misunderstand. I was just saying it casually. I didn't mean anything else. These two senior brothers are extremely outstanding disciples of the Purple Shao Sword sect. It's a pity that they died like this. I'm blaming myself. If I had insisted on asking you for help just now, all of this might not have happened. When Chu Luiyue heard this, she looked nonchalant, and her lips curved up into a cold smile. He thought that Yang Qin'er would be more obedient after the previous incident. He didn't expect her to still be able to distort the truth and not distinguish right from wrong. However, Song Qingyan listened to him. He patted Yang Qin'er's shoulder gently and comforted her softly. Qin'er, you can't be blamed for this. This matter has nothing to do with you at all. Don't blame yourself anymore, okay? After saying that, he looked at Chu Luiyue. The gentle expression on his face instantly turned cold. His eyes and nose were no longer his eyes and his eyes were no longer his nose. Chu Luiyue, Qin'er's words are not without reason. Since you can get rid of those tree roots so easily, why didn't you take action until the two of them were hanged? I think you did it on purpose. Yang Qin'er had once unintentionally mentioned that she had unintentionally offended Chu Luiyue. Because the Purple Shao Sword sect and the Chongshu Pavilion had always disliked each other, Chu Luiyue had intentionally or unintentionally made things difficult for her several times. Recently, Chu Luiyue had become famous in Xiling City, and Song Qingyan couldn't stand it. Coupled with Yang Qiner's nonsense, he was even more disgusted with Chu Luiyue. Therefore at this moment he directly pushed all the blame onto Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was so angry that he laughed. If I remember correctly, I was the one who offered to help at first, but I was rejected by you. Why is it my fault now? Young Master Song, don't tell me you've already forgotten what you said at the beginning? Song Qingyan choked and his face quickly turned red. At that time he didn't put Chu Luiyue in his eyes at all, which was why he said that. Who knew that Chu Luiyue was actually so powerful? There were a total of 10 people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. 2 of them had already died and now another 2 had died. Other than him and Yang Qiner, the rest of them were still missing. There was no trace of them. Even if Song Qingyan had a noble status, he couldn't help but feel a little flustered. He was the one who had brought people there, and all of them were disciples with the most potential in the Purple Shao Sword sect. Now that there were so many casualties, he didn't know how to explain it when he returned. This resentment was naturally vented on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue, those who were dragged down here were more or less injured, but you were the only one who was unharmed. You know better than anyone else what exactly is going on here. You knew that the situation was dangerous, but you still chose to stand by and watch. If you really wanted to save them, you would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Chu Luiyue was secretly sighing at Song Qingyan's increasing ability to pester endlessly when he heard Lei Laosi scolding him. What the f***ck are you spouting? Just as Song Qingyan was speaking confidently, he shuddered after being yelled at by Lei Laosi and forcefully swallowed the rest of his words. He looked at Lei Laosi angrily and embarrassedly. Why you? Who was he? He had never been insulted like this to his face. It was extremely unpleasant. Extremely humiliating. Saving you is kindness, not saving you is my duty. We came over with good intentions and it's fine if you don't appreciate it. In the end you still want to blame us. If you're so capable, why don't you save them yourself? Aren't they all from your Purple Shao Sword sect? What has it got to do with us? Don't think that I can't tell. You were clearly at the same distance as those people just now. It's just that you're selfish and dirty, so you saved this one first. I heard that you're the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master? If the Purple Shao Sword sect's people knew that their young master abandoned his disciple for a woman, I wonder how they would react. Lei Laosi scolded Song Qingyan like a cannonball. Chu Luiyue touched his nose. Back then, Lei Laosi was a rather refined and elegant young master. He didn't expect his appearance to change now, and his ability to scold people had also improved. Song Qingyan was scolded until he couldn't refute at all, and he was so angry that he trembled. It couldn't be helped since Lei Laosi was stronger than him. Although he was arrogant and domineering, he wasn't brainless at all. If they offended Lei Laosi here, who knew if they could still get out? After scolding Song Qingyan, Lei Laosi looked at Yang Qiner. And you? Yang Qiner cowered and hid behind Song Qingyan. Why are you hiding? Lei Laosi didn't know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He only knew that anyone who offended Her Highness had to die. You don't look old, but you're really good at sowing discord. If your mouth doesn't know how to speak, I'll sew it up for you. Yang Qiner was so frightened that she hurriedly covered her mouth and hid behind Song Qingyan. She didn't dare to make a sound and only her tears fell. She hugged Song Qingyan's arm and shivered as though she was terrified. If it were any other time, Song Qingyan would definitely stand up for her. But not now. He was just forcing himself to stand there, so how could he care about Yang Qiner? Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them in such a sorry state and wasn't interested at all. They were just things that weren't presentable. Now the person I'm most worried about is still Xuanhuan. With someone helping, I can't freely investigate Xuanhuan's situation anymore. Xuanhuan. I'm afraid she's really going to recover her Yuan meridian. A series of footsteps was heard. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw that it was actually Jiang Yuqing and the rest. It turned out that they stayed here for too long and didn't go back. The people behind were anxious from waiting, so they simply came together. Seeing Jiang Yuqing in front, Song Qingyan immediately seemed to have found a backer. Yuqing. He and Jiang Yuqing were close in age and their family backgrounds weren't bad. Thus they had always been in contact. Jiang Yuqing's gaze first landed on Chu Luiyue. After confirming that she was fine, his heart relaxed slightly before he looked at Song Qingyan. Qingyan, so it's you guys. What happened? Why are you in such a sorry state? Song Qingyan hurriedly went forward and walked to Jiang Yuqing's side. Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Lei Laosi at the side and hurriedly lowered his voice. Yuqing, you guys must be careful of Chu Luiyue. She has a problem. Jiang Yuqing's expression changed slightly. Oh. Song Qingyan continued. Her relationship with that man is unclear. Just now she even threatened Qiner and me. That's strange. The two of them previously said that they would come over to take a look. Logically speaking, they wouldn't do such a thing. How could Jiang Yuqing not guess Song Qingyan's thoughts? If it were in the past, he might still have the patience to feign civility with him. But now, hearing that Chu Luiyue was being slandered, he was very unhappy. He looked at Chu Luiyue. Luyu, are you okay? Chu Luiyue's face turned cold and her stomach churned. Digression. I couldn't sleep yesterday. Added at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 736. This was the first time Jiang Yuqing called her this, and Chu Luiyue spent a lot of effort to control her expression. What's wrong with this fellow? However, Song Qingyan at the side was greatly shocked. Yuqing, why you just called her? Jiang Yuqing looks gentle and polite, but he's actually very arrogant. Especially now that his status is different, it's even harder for normal people to get close to him. But now, he actually called Chu Luiyue so intimately. When did the relationship between the two of them become so close? Jiang Yuqing glanced at Song Qingyan and smiled lightly as he explained, Oh, right. You probably don't know, but when I met with danger previously, I relied on Luyu to help me escape. Speaking of which, I owe her half my life. Mu Qinghe and the rest had all seen this scene with their own eyes, so they naturally wouldn't refute him. As for the rest, they had more or less accepted Chu Luiyue's help, so they couldn't thank her enough, let alone say anything. Song Qingyan was completely dazed. At the side, Yang Qina widened her eyes in shock, and she even forgot to cry. Why you're saying? Chu Luiyue saved you? Asked Song Qingyan in disbelief. Jiang Yuqing nodded and pointed at the crowd behind him. Actually, for the people behind to be able to come out, almost all of them helped. Chu Luiyue's abilities alone are limited, so she naturally can't take on everything. However, no one could deny that she had played the most crucial role in this process. Song Qingyan looked behind him in a daze. Only then did he see the dense mass of people. At a rough glance, there were at least 300 to 400 people. All of this, Chu Luiyue helped? Song Qingyan's heart suffered a huge impact, and he didn't dare to believe it. But the person who said this was Jiang Yuqing, so he had no choice but to believe it. Recalling Chu Luiyue's swift and decisive manner, Song Qingyan gradually recovered his senses. Seems like Chu Luiyue really has some abilities, not to mention that Lei Laosi, he's very capable, but he seems to listen to Chu Luiyue a lot. With his help, it doesn't seem impossible that Chu Luiyue could do all of this. As for why she's safe and sound, that's because she wasn't swept down from the start, and she only came down when we wanted to find one. Jiang Yuqing gave a simple explanation of the situation with just a few words. He said it calmly, but it was like a stone smashed into Song's heart. At this moment he finally understood how laughable the words he'd said earlier were. In front of Jiang Yuqing, no. I've become a joke in everyone's eyes. Song Qingyan hurriedly glanced around, and as expected, he discovered that many people were looking at him with unfriendly gazes. Most of them were actually black guards. Whispers could be heard. Miss Chu is very warm-hearted. She has been helping people along the way. She won't attack anyone, right? I think so too. Purple Shao Sword Sect. I remember that they wanted to find trouble with Miss Chu at Pingliang Square previously. I'm afraid the bad guys are making the first move. These people didn't speak loudly, but the space was dim and narrow, so any sound could be heard clearly. Song Qingyan was extremely embarrassed and felt as if there was a dagger at his back. Jiang Yuqing smiled. Qingyan, it seems like you misunderstood something. Song Qingyan's breath was stuck in his chest. After an intense internal struggle, he finally accepted his fate and clenched his teeth. Probably, just as he wanted to brush this matter aside, Lei Laosi crossed his arms and spoke lazily. You think it's over with just a misunderstanding? You criticized us quite a bit just now, right? Now that things are clear, you don't intend to apologize? Who did Song Qingyan apologize to? But in this situation he didn't seem to have a second choice. He could only brace himself and speak to Chu Luiyue. Sorry. It was just a short word, but it seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. Lei Laosi dug his ears. What did you say? You're too soft. I didn't hear you. Song Qingyan took a deep breath and could only raise his voice. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you guys. Then, the veins on his forehead could be faintly seen. Yang Qin was originally hiding behind him, hugging his arm and grabbing his hand with both hands. Song Qingyan used so much strength that he actually subconsciously held Yang Qin's hand tightly. Her expression changed and she almost shouted out in pain. Her hand bones were about to be crushed. Chu Luiyue watched this scene as if he was watching a show. Although she was a little surprised that Jiang Yuqing spoke up for her, she didn't feel anything in her heart and even felt a little nauseous. However, since Jiang Yuqing admitted that he owed her a favor, then, it would be a waste if she didn't accept it. Mu Qinghe took 2 steps forward and pointed in a certain direction. I heard some commotion over here just now. Is it because of those 2 people? Chu Luiyue followed his finger and looked over. He was referring to the 2 people who died just now. That's right. Chu Luiyue nodded and briefly explained what had happened. Of course, it was inevitable that she would mention that she wanted to help, but was rejected by Song Qingyan. Chu Luiyue spoke casually as if he did not take it to heart. However, to everyone's ears, they felt that Song Qingyan did not know what was good for him. He actually had the cheek to complain about Chu Luiyue just now? Although no one said anything, they all felt some disdain for Song Qingyan in their hearts. Song Qingyan felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed in front of these people. If not for the fact that he was worried about encountering more danger, he would have left immediately. Yang Qin gently tugged at his sleeve and said softly. Only then did Song Qingyan let go of her hand. Yang Qin's wrist was almost broken. She looked down nervously and saw that there seemed to be a red blood stain on her sleeve. She was shocked and immediately wanted to bandage it. The other party seems to have become stronger than before. We have to hurry. Upon hearing this, Yang Qin's expression changed slightly, and she suddenly said hesitantly, Are you looking for the person controlling the tree branch? I remember that the tree root flew from that direction. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed in a direction. It was dark all around and no one knew what she was pointing at. Jiang Yuqing frowned slightly. Really? Yang Qin nodded timidly. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and was about to speak when she suddenly felt an itch by her ear. She turned to look at Dumpling only to see Dumpling flying straight ahead. Target, Yang Qin. Chu Luiyue found it strange. She was about to ask Dumpling to come back when Dumpling flew over Yang Qin's head. Yang Qin was frightened and screamed. She retreated in a hurry, but Dumpling flapped her wings and she fell. Don't touch me. She shouted in panic, but she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her wrist. Rip, half of her sleeve was torn off. A terrifying scarlet wound on her wrist was exposed in front of everyone. A strong smell of blood suddenly erupted. It was extremely similar to the smell of the tree root. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 737. Everything happened too quickly. When the wound on her wrist tore open again, Yang Qin knew it was bad. Song Qingyan originally wanted to help her up, but his expression changed slightly when he smelled the smell. Qin, what happened to you? A fierce look flashed across Yang Qin's eyes. Without another word, she turned and fled. Her speed was actually much faster than the realm she had displayed before. Dumpling immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the opposite side of Yang Qin. It flapped its wings. A scarlet flame suddenly flew out and condensed into a barrier in the air. Yang Qin was caught off guard. By the time she discovered the flame boundary in front of her, it was already too late to stop. In a panic, she could only throw out a wave of force, wanting to use the rebound force to avoid the flame. However, the flame spread extremely quickly. Yang Qin had just turned around when she realized that she was completely trapped in a cage formed by flames. The scorching heat roasted her, and her entire body was burning. She clenched her teeth and set up a boundary around herself. However, how could her boundary resist the power of a divine beast like Dumpling? Not long later, her boundary began to shake as if it would explode at any time. Chu Luiyue quickly rushed over. Yang Qin's thoughts flashed, and she looked at Song Qingyan with tears in her eyes. Senior brother Qingyan, save me. Song Qingyan was also secretly puzzled. However, when he saw Yang Qin's tortured appearance, he felt pity for her. He hurriedly said to Chu Luiyue, who had just rushed over. Chu Luiyue, hurry up and have your magical beast release her. If this goes on, Qin won't be able to take it. However, Chu Luiyue acted as if she didn't hear him and walked straight to the cage formed by flames. Song Qingyan was anxious. Without thinking, he reached out to pull Chu Luiyue. You didn't listen to what I said. Chu Luiyue suddenly turned her head and looked over. Song Qingyan's movements suddenly paused. The young girl in front of him had a cold expression, and her gaze was as sharp as a knife. However, this cold and indifferent gaze made him feel a deep chill from the bottom of his heart. Song Qingyan's hand froze in midair, but he couldn't continue to reach forward. Chu Luiyue seemed to be even more difficult to provoke than he thought. While he was in a daze, Chu Luiyue had already retracted her warning gaze and looked at Yang Qiner with a cold expression. What's with the injury on your wrist? Yang Qiner and turned her head. I was just accidentally scratched by a tree root. It's nothing, oh? Chu Luiyue asked faintly. Then, the smell just now was also accidentally contaminated by it? That's strange. That smell just now. It seems to be coming from your wound. That was definitely not a normal bloody smell. That smell was exactly the same as the smell she had when she had cut open the roots. This could only mean that Yang Qiner's body had also devoured the power of these roots. But how did she do it? Even Jiang Yuqing and the rest avoided these tree roots, but Yang Qiner was the exact opposite. Yang Qiner clenched her teeth. She wanted to defend herself, but Chu Luiyue stared at her as if she could see through everything. At such a time, no matter what she said, it would be like a joke. Seeing that Yang Qiner didn't say anything, Song Qingyan panicked. Qiner, what exactly is going on? She was clearly still trapped in the entanglement of those tree roots just now, so why? But Yang Qiner refused to say anything. Chu Luiyue pondered for a while and suddenly took a step forward. Lei Laosi followed her worriedly. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him and shook his head gently. I'll ask her. Don't worry. Lei Laosi could only stop. But everyone, including him, was staring at Chu Luiyue closely. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes, and a guess flashed across her mind. Previously, there was a period of time when Yang Qiner seemed to be quite close to Xuanhuan, and she would even cook porridge for Xuanhuan. Back then, Chu Luiyue felt that something was amiss. As the third princess, Xuanhuan had someone to take care of everything in the palace. Since when did she lack someone to cook porridge for her? Xuanhuan said that she got along well with Yang Qiner, so she let her stay in the palace for a few more days. But even a fool wouldn't believe this. What was even stranger was that those days were actually when Yang Qiner testified that Chu Luiyue took away the Long Yuan sword and was proven to be false. According to Xuanhuan's temper, not only did she not punish Yang Qiner, but she even kept her by her side. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth slightly and said something silently. As her back was facing the crowd, only Yang Qiner saw her words. Xuanhuan used your Yuan meridian, didn't she? Yang Qiner widened her eyes in shock as if she had seen a ghost. They had done this very secretly. How could Chu Luiyue have guessed it? Seeing Yang Qiner's reaction, Chu Luiyue was instantly certain of her guess. As expected, Xuanhuan had already made a move on Yang Qiner from then on. It was normal for her to want to do this, but why would Yang Qiner agree? Could it be that she was forced by Xuanhuan's power? Chu Luiyue still remembered Yang Qiner's expression when she delivered the porridge. It didn't seem like she was forced. Moreover, after such a long time, other than Yang Qiner's body becoming weaker, she didn't seem to be affected much in other aspects. Looking at the strength she displayed just now, she didn't seem weak. Chu Luiyue's gaze landed on the wound on Yang Qiner's wrist. Suddenly her gaze froze. The strength in Yang Qiner's body actually came from Xuanhuan. Although I don't know what method the two of them used, I can be sure that Yang Qiner's strength would become stronger along with Xuanhuan's strength. Then, Xuanhuan might already know the situation here. Chu Luiyue retreated without hesitation. Yang Qiner suddenly looked up and sneered. Want to escape? It's too late. A black rune suddenly flashed across her glabella and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, her aura started to surge. Qin Yi's expression changed and he immediately said, "Retreat. She's going to self-destruct." Before he could finish his sentence, he had already rushed towards Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi also sensed that something was amiss and immediately ran. However, the two of them were still one step too late. Boom. A loud explosion was heard. A turbulent and violent energy spread out in all directions. In an instant, flames filled the sky. When Yang Qiner's physical body was destroyed, a black ripple appeared in the air. A strong suction force came from inside. It instantly swallowed Chu Luiyue. Her figure disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Luiyue? Miss Chu. Everyone exclaimed in unison. The moment Yang Qiner self-destructed, Dumpling instantly flew over and blocked in front of Chu Luiyue. The next moment, Chu Luiyue felt her vision turn black, and she was instantly dragged into darkness by some force. However, just as she was about to retaliate, she suddenly realized that the violent force was isolated outside. A barrier was emitting a lustrous glow, protecting her within it. Chu Luiyue blinked. Crystal barrier? Why did it come out by itself before I could even move? Digression. There's only one more chapter left. I feel embarrassed to keep everyone waiting. I'll update it tomorrow at noon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Web. Are you threatening me? Xuanhuan's expression was cold. It was fine if it was Jiang Yuqing, but the others definitely couldn't know that she was here, let alone what she was doing. Third princess, why do you say that? I'm just an ordinary person. How can I threaten you? As Chu Luiyue spoke, he glanced around unintentionally. Ever since you disappeared, we've been very worried. For this reason, we didn't hesitate to try our best to barge in and even encountered many dangers. Many sect disciples and black cavalry were entangled by those tree roots. Their deaths were really tragic. It's great that you're safe and sound. Xuanhuan stared at Chu Luiyue and was silent for a while. Then she suddenly sneered. In the silent and cold space, this sound seemed particularly abrupt and cold. Chu Luiyue, you don't have to feign civility in front of me. You know better than anyone how you came here. Yang Qing'er is already dead. What's the point of saying this? Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's expression faded. It seems like the third princess has admitted that Yang Qing'er's injuries and death are related to you? She should have died long ago. It's already her blessing that I let her stay for a few more days. At this point, Xuanhuan was very clear that Chu Luiyue had probably guessed many things. Therefore, she directly brought Chu Luiyue over and laid her cards on the table. But you. This is the divine beast you just contracted? Xuanhuan looked at Dumpling, who was on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Her eyes were filled with jealousy and resentment. If it wasn't for Chu Luiyue, this divine beast would have been hers. What a pity, Xuanhuan muttered softly, her face filled with dense killing intent. It was a pity that this divine beast had already been contracted and couldn't recognize a new master. So, she could only kill it together with her. It wasn't easy for a divine beast to appear in the world. In the end, not only could she not take it for herself, she even had to take its life. Xuanhuan's hatred for Chu Luiyue deepened. Dumpling seemed to be a little agitated. Chu Luiyue patted its head gently and comforted it in her heart. When she discovered that Yang Qing'er might be colluding with Xuanhuan, she had already expected this situation. Since Xuanhuan dared to say these words so brazenly, it was obvious that she didn't intend to let her leave alive. But Xuanhuan wanted her life. It wasn't that easy. I remember that you also have a Daijing Yuan meridian and your grade isn't low? Xuanhuan sized up Chu Luiyue, her eyes filled with undisguised greed and excitement. Now she only needed a little bit of strength to completely restore her Yuan meridian. Maybe Chu Luiyue could complete it. After all, Chu Luiyue's strength had always been much stronger than the realm she displayed. Plus, she had a divine beast. Chu Luiyue smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. It seems that the third princess is very interested in my Yuan meridian? Xuanhuan couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. It's your honor to be able to serve me. Xuanhuan raised her hand and waved it forward. A dark blue origin power flew out in an instant. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. At the same time, countless tree roots flew over from all directions. Whoosh, Dumpling's body flashed, and she instantly transformed into her true form. She flapped her huge wings and scarlet flames surged out. All the tree roots were easily brushed away and were tainted by the scarlet flames. In an instant, the flames soared into the sky. The surrounding darkness was dispelled. It was as bright as day. A violent wind blew. It was oppressive. Xuanhuan clenched her fists tightly, and her heart was filled with hatred. Even though there was a barrier in front of her, she could still feel the terrifying power of the attacks. The power of a divine beast was so shocking. No wonder Chu Luiyue was so bold. With this red-tailed phoenix, she didn't even need to do anything herself. The huge figure entrenched itself above Chu Luiyue's head, carefully protecting her under its wings. The surrounding flames shone brightly on Chu Luiyue's face and body. Xuanhuan gritted her teeth and glared at her. Chu Luiyue's expression was indifferent. When she met Xuanhuan's resentful and jealous gaze, she suddenly smiled. Xuanhuan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. That smile, those eyes, that expression, it was very similar to the person who was wrapped in flames in the Imperial Ancestral Hall that day. Xuanhuan unconsciously took half a step back, extremely shocked. Who exactly are you? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 739. Everything was like the scene from that day. It was like a nightmare. Xuanhuan's body was trembling and her face was pale. Chu Luiyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Me? I'm Chu Luiyue. How can third princess not recognize me? Her tone was light as if she was teasing her. Xuanhuan took a deep breath and kept telling herself in her heart that this was Chu Luiyue. This was Chu Luiyue. But the firelight reflected on her beautiful face, making it half bright and half dark. It was very similar to Xuanhuan. Chu Luiyue took a step forward and seemed a little worried. Third princess, what's wrong? Don't come over. Don't come over. Xuanhuan screamed. At the same time she hurriedly stepped back and accidentally fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue stopped and stood there, quietly looking at Xuanhuan with a smile. For a moment she seemed to be high and mighty. Xuanhuan looked at Chu Luiyue, her heart beating wildly. Chu Luiyue stood there and looked down at her as if she had done it countless times. Xuanhuan's face burned. It was too embarrassing for her to be in such a sorry state. Chu Luiyue was Chu Luiyue. Who else could she be? No one knew better than her that Xuanhuan was dead. He was completely and utterly dead. There was no chance of her coming back to life. An illusion. These were all illusions. Xuanhuan forced herself to stand up. The way she looked at Chu Luiyue gradually became fierce. Even if Chu Luiyue didn't discover all this today and didn't barge in, she definitely wouldn't let her stay for long. Her face alone was enough to kill her 10,000 times. Yes, Chu Luiyue. You're Chu Luiyue. Xuanhuan said hatefully. No one knew who she was repeating it to. Chu Luiyue looked at her with interest. Xuanhuan's reaction was really interesting. Chu Luiyue originally thought that Xuanhuan was full of hatred for her and would be very happy after killing her back then. But now, it wasn't that she wasn't guilty and afraid. Chu Luiyue was suddenly curious. If Xuanhuan knew that she was really Xuanhuan, what would her expression be? No matter who you are, you deserve to die. Xuanhuan's heart was filled with anger and fear. Even though she kept convincing herself in her heart that this person was Chu Luiyue. However, countless scenes from the past appeared in the past. The intense emotions caused her facial features to distort. A black aura was faintly discernible between her brows, and there was a faint green light in her eyes. From afar she looked like a malicious spirit. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Just now she was a little puzzled. When did Xuanhuan's force turn green? She didn't expect that there would be flames of the same color dancing in her eyes now. It looked very strange. Could it be that she had used a special method to devour other people's yuan meridians? Xuanhuan attacked again. This time she used almost all of her strength. The berserk power carried a terrifying pressure as it came crashing down. The space around Chu Luiyue was instantly compressed. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on her body, and even the flow of the force in her body slowed down. At this moment, Xuanhuan's strength had definitely reached rank 8. Although Chu Luiyue had already broken through to rank 5, there was still a huge gap between her and Xuanhuan. Dumpling let out a clear cry. Screech! A ball of red flames instantly condensed into a barrier, protecting Chu Luiyue in the middle. At the same time, it flapped its wings and several feathers flew out. They were like sharp swords that pierced toward Xuanhuan. Thud thud thud. The feathers that emitted a gorgeous glow and carried a powerful aura, fiercely hitting the black barrier in front of Xuanhuan. The black barrier trembled. Xuanhuan gritted her teeth. It would be difficult to devour Chu Luiyue's power in a short period of time. That crimson gold pill phoenix by her side was seriously too powerful. The most important thing for her now was to recover her yuan meridian. She asked in her heart, "Senior, do you have a way to deal with that divine beast?" After a moment, a hoarse voice lazily sounded. "I can help you stall that red gold phoenix for half an hour. Whether you can kill Chu Luiyue or not will depend on your ability." "Thank you, Senior." Xuanhuan was overjoyed. As long as there was no interference from that divine beast, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to deal with Chu Luiyue? Not to mention half an hour, she could take Chu Luiyue's life with a single move. Then a black rune appeared between Xuanhuan's brows. Then it floated out. A cold aura spread out from it. It quietly passed through the barrier and drew an arc in the air. Chu Luiyue looked at it and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. The force that forcefully dragged her over just now seemed to be exactly the same as the aura of this rune. Could it be that this was the mysterious existence that was secretly helping xuanhuan? A sense of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart. This rune was definitely more difficult to deal with than xuanhuan. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Liwei saw that the rune had already flown towards Dumpling. Several black lines floated out from the surface of the sword. Those lines were even thinner than a strand of hair. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Tuanzi's body burned with red flames in an instant. Her pair of dazzling crystal-like eyes were also shining brightly. However, when the flames touched the black lines, they actually didn't burn. The black lines passed through the flames and quickly outlined a huge net. Dumpling. Chu Liu's heart tightened and immediately wanted Dumpling to retreat. However, it was already too late. That huge net directly trapped Dumpling. At the same time, xuanhuan rushed over. She threw a simple and direct punch. Die! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 740. Just as Chu Liwei and xuanhuan were in an intense battle, the people left behind were also very anxious. Yang Qin'er's sudden self-destruction caught everyone off guard. By the time they reacted, Chu Liu's figure had already disappeared. The only thing left on the battlefield was the violent aftermath of the explosion. Lei Laosi stared at the empty space, feeling angry and regretful as his chest heaved up and down. Her Highness was right in front of me, yet I actually couldn't protect her well. She could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into the void. 2 years ago, we weren't by Her Highness's side, which gave those people a chance. But now, the blood in Lei Laosi's body surged as he raised his hand, wanting to slap himself. Laosi. Qin Yi, who was standing beside him, suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi's raised hand instantly stopped in midair. He looked up and saw his big brother looking at him with a calm expression and a hint of warning in his eyes. If we overreact now, we'll definitely be suspected by others. Jiang Yuqing, Mu Qinghe, and the rest are still watching from behind. Qin Yi's silent warning made Lei Laosi come to his senses. He clenched his teeth and put his hand back, but his fists were tightly clenched, and the veins on his forehead were faintly visible. What happened just now? Jiang Yuqing hurriedly walked over with a cold and stern expression. Qin Yi turned around with a calm expression. Yang Qin self-destructed and tore open the empty space. The mastermind also forcefully dragged her away. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. This means that there's indeed something wrong with Yang Qin? Who exactly is the mastermind behind this? Qin Yi shook his head and looked at Song Qingyan. Song Qingyan instantly looked like he was scalded. Why are you looking at me? What do you mean by that gaze? Yang Qin is from the Purple Shao Sword sect, and she's very close to you, young Master Song. Now that something happened to her, don't you have anything to say? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every single word was extremely sharp. It directly raised Song Qingyan's suspicion to the highest level. The surrounding people all looked over suspiciously. That's right. Everyone had clearly seen how Song Qingyan had protected Yang Qin with all his might just now. Did he not know that there was something wrong with Yang Qin? Song Qingyan said angrily. What can I say? I don't know anything. Initially he wanted to defend Yang Qin, but in this situation, any words would be useless. Yang Qin had chosen to self-destruct. If this wasn't a guilty conscience, then what was? Coupled with her strange wound from before, even Song Qingyan was well aware that she must be hiding something. The person was already dead, and the most important thing now was to clear himself of suspicion. Oh, you were so close to her. Do you really not know anything about what she said or did? Qin Yi asked. Song Qingyan felt extremely aggrieved. I really don't know. Even if I ask you 100 times, you still don't know. How long had Yang Qin been in the Purple Shao Sword sect? He was also attracted to her because she was beautiful and gentle, which was why he got close to her. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Qingyan, I believe that this matter has nothing to do with you, but any clues are very important now. If there's anything wrong with her, feel free to tell me if you know anything. The person who said this was Jiang Yuqing. Song Qingyan looked at him in disbelief. This means, Jiang Yuqing is clearly suspicious of me. Just as he was about to refute, he saw Jiang Yuqing's serious expression, as if he was very concerned about this matter. No. He was clearly concerned about Chu Liwei. Song Qingyan had some understanding of Jiang Yuqing. Seeing his reaction, he could basically guess what he was thinking and could not help but be secretly shocked. Mu Qinghe, who was at the side, glanced at Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid. Jiang Yuqing looked gentle and polite, but he was actually cold-hearted and ruthless. The person he valued the most was himself. Xuanhuan had been missing for so long, but he had never been so anxious. Chu Luiyue just disappeared, yet he already couldn't hold it in. Mu Qinghe looked down and suppressed the guess in her heart. I'm afraid that Jiang Yuqing himself hasn't noticed this, right? I really don't know anything. If I knew, why would I waste so much effort to save her just now? Why would I speak up for her? Song Qingyan defended himself. Nothing could be seen from Jiang Yuqing's expression, but his eyes were deep and obscure. It seems like I really can't get anything out of Song Qingyan. He looked at Qin Yi again. Young Master Qin, do you have a way to find her current location? The moment he said that, he heard footsteps behind him. I know where she is. The cold and indifferent voice of a youth sounded. The surroundings fell silent. Qin Yi looked at the golden-haired youth standing in front of him. His expression was cold and his lips were slightly pursed. Only his eyes were filled with determination. Qin Yi narrowed his eyes. Chang Wanzhou continued. I'll bring you to save her. Qin Yi gave a half-smile. Why me? Because you're the strongest. You can help her. Chang Wanzhou stared at him fixedly. He didn't say the remaining half of his sentence. It's also because Chu Luiyue trusts Qin Yi. He could clearly see that Chu Luiyue trusted Qin Yi and Lei Laoxi a lot. Even though he didn't know why he trusted her. Qin Yi paused and nodded. Okay. Jiang Yuqing immediately asked, why? Then where exactly is she? The moment he asked that, Jiang Yuqing realized that he was too anxious. His expression changed and he added, if we go together, we'll go together. The chances of success will be higher. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran had already followed them and seemed to want to go together. Chang Wanzhou glanced at Jiang Yuqing and slowly swept his gaze across the crowd. She's very far from here. If too many people go, it will only drag down the speed. Jiang Yuqing's face was a little ugly. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran originally wanted to go, but they hesitated when they heard that. Then you guys go first. It's more important to save Lu Yu first. Don't worry about us. Even though Mu Hongyu was also very worried, she still said that. She had a faint yuan body and could teleport, so it was actually more convenient for her compared to the others. However, she wasn't sure if her current skills were enough. It wouldn't be good if she became everyone's burden when she went there. Yi Ranran also nodded seriously. Big brother Qin, you guys go first. Since they already said that, the others couldn't say anything else. Qin Yi raised his hand and gently waved it, tearing open space. Then he stepped in. Chang Wanzhou followed closely behind. Lei Laoxi was about to follow when Qin Yi glanced at him and lightly shook his head. Protect them well. After that, the two of them completely disappeared. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and fell into deep thought. If Chu Luiyue was really taken away by Xuanhuan just now, I actually know the location. Digression. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 741. Jiang Yuqing was very conflicted, as if there were two of him arguing in his mind. On one hand, if Xuanhuan really did all this, she definitely wouldn't leave Chu Luiyue alive. Even if Qin Yi and the rest went over, they might not be able to save Chu Luiyue. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue probably already knew something. If she made it out of here alive, she would undoubtedly be a huge hidden danger to Xuanhuan. She might even implicate me. After all, I'm in the same boat as Xuanhuan. If Chu Luiyue exposed what Xuanhuan did, our marriage would definitely be ruined. Xuanhuan, together with him, would suffer a disastrous fall in status. There were already many people in Xiling City who hated him. Once he lost his power, it went without saying what awaited him. After thinking for a long time, Jiang Yuqing's gaze gradually turned cold. At this point, Chu Luiyue and Xuanhuan didn't know what was happening in another place. Xuanhuan threw a punch. This punch was extremely simple and clean. There weren't any fancy moves and only an extremely domineering force. A ghostly green fist shadow flew out, silently tearing through space. It drew a perfect arc in midair. Finally, it went straight for Chu Luiyue's face. The space in front of Chu Luiyue was harshly squeezed. Under this valiant suppression, Chu Luiyue felt as if something heavy was pressing down on every part of her body, and it was extremely painful and unbearable. Her entire body seemed to have been frozen, and even moving became extremely difficult. A Stage 8 warrior's all-out attack. Even Chu Luiyue wouldn't be able to face it head-on. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed with coldness as she watched the rapidly approaching fist shadows. Buzz. The water droplet in her dantian suddenly started spinning. Boundless energy surged out and instantly filled her limbs and bones. With the support of this power, the pressure on Chu Liyue was greatly reduced. With a slight movement of her feet, she disappeared from the spot. The shadow of the fist missed. Xuanhuan narrowed her eyes and sneered. You do have some skills. Chu Liyue's aura was clearly much stronger than before. From the looks of it, she indeed had a trump card that could not be underestimated. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dodge her full-force attack so easily. No wonder Chu Liyue was able to obtain first place in the previous competitions. Xuanhuan's heart was filled with disdain. You want to rely on this little bit of strength to escape today? I'm afraid you're too naive. No matter how many tricks he had, they were all jokes in the face of absolute power. An idea popped up in Xuanhuan's mind, and the fist shadow suddenly changed its direction and continued charging toward Chu Liyue. However, at this moment, a silver ray of light flew out from Chu Liyue's hand. Xuanhuan narrowed her eyes and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that it was the dagger that Chu Liyue had used before. She raised the corner of her mouth in a mocking smile. You want to rely on this thing to break this consort's attack? What a joke. As the saying goes, an inch longer is an inch stronger. A handy yuan instrument could often increase a cultivator's combat power. However, Chu Liyue seemed to have always used this dagger. No matter how sharp and useful this dagger was, it was still easily inferior to swords, spears, swords, and halberds. Therefore, from Xuanhuan's point of view, Chu Liyue's insistence on using this dagger was just asking for trouble. However, in the next second, her complacent and disdainful smile froze on her face. This was because Chu Liyue's dagger had harshly split her fist shadow in half. It was extremely fast. The fist shadow's power did not seem to be of any use as it was torn apart just like that. The condensed power instantly dissipated. Chu Liyue had already retreated and set up a barrier in front of him, blocking the violent energy outside. Xuanhuan was both shocked and furious. The dagger in Chu Liyue's hand, there was clearly something wrong with it. Perhaps it's also a rare treasure. No wonder she never let it go. If it were any other time, Xuanhuan might have some interest in that dagger. However, at this moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of killing Chu Liyue as soon as possible. Since her first attack had failed, she quickly made another move. This time she was much more serious. Her figure flashed and she rushed in front of Chu Liyue. Although Chu Liyue was fast, he was not as fast as Xuanhuan, who was moving at full speed. Moreover, under such circumstances she did not intend to continue hiding. Xuanhuan's hands formed a seal in front of her. The dark green force surged out one after another and formed a palm print in front of Xuanhuan. This palm print was about the size of her hand and emitted a sparkling glow. The surrounding power began to gather towards this palm print. Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes. She was too familiar with this move that Xuanhuan used. This was because this was a palm technique that only the disciples of the Tianling dynasty's royal family could cultivate, Lingxiao palm. Most importantly, although this was an earth rank martial skill, the power that it could unleash was enough to reach the heaven rank. Xuanhuan's hands paused, and then she changed her posture slightly. The surrounding energy began to surge towards the palm print even more violently. Chu Liyue sneered in his heart. The Lingxiao palm was divided into 3 levels. The first level was something that all the disciples of the royal family could cultivate, but the second level required the cultivator's strength to reach the 7th rank before they were qualified to continue cultivating. This requirement might be a little high for ordinary people. But for the disciples of the Tianling royal family, it was not difficult. However, not everyone was able to successfully cultivate the second level. Because the Lingxiao palm was obscure and difficult to understand, many people were unable to enter the second level. As for the third level, it could only be continued after reaching the 8th rank. Although the current Xuanhuan had barely reached the 8th rank, her yuan meridian was damaged, and it was impossible for her to continue studying it. Therefore she only displayed the strength of the second level. However, in her opinion, this was enough to deal with Chu Liyue. To be able to make me use the second level of the Lingxiao palm, you can be considered to have died a worthy death. Chu Liyue's expression was cold, and a mocking smile flashed across the corner of her mouth. Speaking of which, Xuanhuan could not learn the second level no matter how hard she tried. She had to secretly beg her and learn from her. At that time, Xuanhuan finally succeeded in cultivating it after her patient guidance. She was overjoyed and tactfully said that she hoped to give her father a surprise. How could Xuanhuan not know what she meant back then? However, she did not mind and took the initiative to say that she would not reveal this matter. To outsiders, she would only say that Xuanhuan had comprehended it herself. After the news spread, many people praised Xuanhuan for her intelligence. Even her father's attitude towards Xuanhuan was much gentler. He said that he could not tell when she was young, but she had become smarter as she grew older. Chu Liyue's hand moved slightly in her sleeve. Since she was the one who taught her back then, it was time for her to return it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 742. Chu Liyue held his breath and concentrated. The force in his body quickly surged toward his right hand. A starlight suddenly lit up on his fingertip. Soon, the starlight separated and floated to the finger beside him. In the blink of an eye, all 3 fingers on Chu Liyue's right hand had lit up. But it did not stop. The 4th starlight appeared shakily. Although it looked a little weaker than the previous 3, it still appeared. The surrounding energy surged as if it wanted to rush over. However, Chu Liyue waved his other hand gently and repelled all the dirty energy. Xuanhuan might not mind. She might even be happy to devour the surrounding energy. She could not dislike. It was too dirty. Therefore, Chu Liyue simply continued to mobilize the energy in his body. The water droplets spun quickly. The 5 patterns fluctuated, and the majestic force continuously surged toward Chu Liyue. Sensing that Chu Liyue had isolated the surrounding energy, but his aura was still rising rapidly, Xuanhuan's expression changed slightly. How did he do it? Could it be that Chu Liyue had other trump cards? This momentary distraction caused the energy that Xuanhuan was gathering to become chaotic for a moment. She quickly focused and stabilized it with great difficulty. Seeing that the green palm print had finally returned to normal, Xuanhuan closed her eyes. She felt somewhat sullen. It was true that she had learned the 2nd level, but a large part of it was actually copied from Xuanhuan. Because she did not fully comprehend it, she had to follow every step that Xuanhuan had taught her when she used this move. If there were any mistakes in the process, all her efforts would be for naught. On one hand, Xuanhuan was proud that she could cultivate to the 2nd level. On the other hand, she was trapped because she could not use it freely. Every time she used the move, she would be greatly restricted. Moreover, every time she used it, she would inevitably think of Xuanhuan. For this reason, Xuanhuan would not use this move under normal circumstances. However, he needed to end the battle quickly, so this was the best choice. Lines glowing faintly appeared on the palm. From afar they looked like palm prints. The finer the palm print was, the stronger the power it contained. Different cultivators had different insights and understandings of this move, so the palm lines they drew were also different. However, Xuanhuan learned it from Xuanhuan, so her palm prints were very similar to hers. However, it was much simpler than Xuanhuan's. When Xuanhuan finished the last stroke, the 5th star quietly appeared on Chu Liyue's fingertips. Chu Liyue looked up and her gaze lingered on Xuanhuan's palm print for a moment. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. After such a long time, Xuanhuan's cultivation of the Lingxiao palm did not improve at all. Well, her Yuan meridian was destroyed, so she could not even compare to ordinary cultivators. How could she still comprehend the Lingxiao palm? It must have been hard for her to memorize these little by little, not daring to forget them. Chu Liyue raised her hand gently. 5 stars shone brightly. She had already memorized the stupefying god art by heart. Therefore, after breaking through to the 5th stage, she naturally comprehended the stupefying god art. Now, because the force in her body was much more abundant, she could finally light up all 5 stars. You think you can compete with my palm technique? Xuanhuan sneered. She cultivated the martial technique of the Tianling dynasty, which had been passed down for thousands of years. How could Chu Liyue compare to it? Chu Liyue did not seem to hear her and gently pushed her palm forward. A silver palm print floated in the air. The light was bright but not dazzling. However, the surrounding space started to collapse silently, and a circle of black appeared. The palm print floated there quietly, but it contained a pressure that could not be underestimated. Xuanhuan's expression changed slightly. Chu Liyue's move seemed to be an earth-stage martial technique. She frowned and scolded herself for thinking too much. Even if it was an earth-stage martial technique, Chu Liyue was so much weaker than her. She could not compete with her. With a thought, she pushed the palm print out. Lingxiao palm. The dark green palm print flew forward noiselessly. At the same time, Chu Liyue's silver palm print also started to move. She actually chose to fight head-on with Xuanhuan. You overestimate yourself. Xuanhuan sneered disdainfully. The two palm prints quickly approached each other. Before they even touched, the power of both sides began to fight crazily. The space between the two shattered one after another. Crack. Even a crack had appeared on the stone platform below. A dark green light flashed through the crack. Xuanhuan did not notice this. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something and suddenly stared at the crack. Something was wrong. It was an intuition. Even if there seemed to be no problem now, she still felt a faint sense of uneasiness in her heart. Suddenly there was a fluctuation in front of her. Chu Liyue quickly looked up. After a fierce battle, the power of the Jingshan palm was gradually devoured, and it began to slowly retreat. On the other hand, although Xuanhuan's Lingxiao palm consumed a lot of power, because her level was much higher than Chu Liyue's, the power contained in her palm was also more abundant. At a glance, the Lingxiao palm was gradually gaining the upper hand. Xuanhuan spurred on, "Go!" The Lingxiao palm was quickly approaching. It seemed that she intended to completely devour the Jingshan palm. At this moment, the Jingshan palm suddenly exploded. Countless starlights scattered. Xuanhuan thought that she had won this time. Just as a smug smile appeared on her face, she saw that the starlight did not dissipate. Instead, it burst out with a dazzling light. For a moment, the light was dazzling. The dazzling light illuminated the place as if it was daytime. Sizzle. When the light surrounded the Lingxiao palm, there was a burst of ear-piercing sound at the edge. It sounded like something was being burned crazily. The palm print began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. An unpleasant smell quickly spread out. Xuanhuan was shocked and could not believe what she saw. How was this possible? Chu Liyue was only a stage 5 warrior. How could her palm technique have such terrifying power? But at this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly moved. Her two hands formed a strange gesture in front of her. Xuanhuan took a look and felt that the gesture was somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen it before. Then Chu Liyue raised her hand and gently drew in the air. The starlight in the sky surged. Soon it formed a pattern. Xuanhuan stared at it closely, afraid that she would miss something. Chu Liyue's movements were very slow, so Xuanhuan could see it very clearly. She even unconsciously sketched it in her mind. Slowly she finally realized that something was wrong. The pattern drawn by Chu Liyue was gradually overlapping with the palm print pattern of the second level of the Lingxiao palm. Digression? Don't ask. If you ask, it means that the 6th watch is at 6:30. If you ask again, you will be procrastinating. Cough. Slipping away. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 743. The patterns drawn by Chu Liyue were actually completely different from the palm prints. However, for some reason, they were inexplicably compatible and gradually intertwined with each other. Xuanhuan had a bad feeling and immediately looked away, trying to clear her mind of the mess. She had painstakingly memorized the palm prints, so there must not be any deviation. Even so, it did not seem to be of much use. Just now, she had been looking at it for quite a while and she had been looking at it very seriously. She had clearly memorized all of Chu Liyue's movements, including the veined patterns. And now, those patterns were deeply engraved in her mind, and she could not get rid of them even if she wanted to. Gradually, Xuanhuan realized that her memory of the second level of the Lingxiao palm was starting to become chaotic. The two diagrams slowly intersected and very soon, it became a mess. This situation was too strange. Xuanhuan had cultivated for many years, but she had never encountered such a situation before. She had painstakingly learned the Lingxiao palm back then, and she had put in a lot of effort to learn it. In order to win a word of praise from her imperial father, and to make everyone look at her in a new light, she did not hesitate to secretly ask Xuanhuan for help. Because Xuanhuan's understanding of the Lingxiao palm was more thorough and detailed than hers, the Lingxiao palm that the two of them executed was different. Even if she had learned it according to Xuanhuan's palm prints, if an ordinary person did not look carefully, they would not notice any problems. Moreover, Xuanhuan had always been very careful and rarely used this move in front of others. This was originally a move that she had been thinking about for a long time, and it was almost engraved in her bones and blood. It was not that she had never fought with others before, but it had never been like this. The more anxious Xuanhuan was, the more confused her mind became. Even the green palm print was affected, and the patterns on the palm started to become chaotic. This chaos caused the power of the Lingxiao palm to decrease greatly. Chu Liyue glanced at Xuanhuan indifferently. Xuanhuan had already turned her gaze away, trying not to look at them. She held her head with both hands, looking conflicted and pained. As if she had sensed Chu Liyue's gaze, she suddenly raised her head and screamed. Chu Liyue, what kind of trick are you playing? Chu Liyue chuckled, but his hands didn't stop moving. The pattern in front of him seemed casual, but it had a strong regularity to it. Ordinary people wouldn't feel much when they saw this pattern. At most, they would feel dizzy after looking at it for a long time. But Xuanhuan was different. As long as she saw it, she would never forget it. Because this pattern was the third level of the Ling Xiao palm. Back then, after Chu Liyue broke through to the 8th rank, he began to cultivate the last level of the Ling Xiao palm. Her comprehension ability was extremely high, and it did not take her long to completely comprehend it. But no one knew about it except herself. Even his father, the emperor, knew nothing about this. At that time, she just did it as a matter of course and did not think of announcing it to show off. After all, she was already the most noble existence. Naturally, she did not need to use such a method to prove her excellence like Xuanhuan. And now this had given her a lot of convenience. Because he was worried about exposing his identity, Chu Liyue had not used any of the martial arts skills he knew since his rebirth. If not for Xuanhuan's move today, Chu Liyue would not have thought of using this move to deal with her. The cultivation of the Ling Xiao palm was divided into 3 levels. Each level was a summary and transcendence of the previous level, and the 3rd level was even more so. Xuanhuan had cultivated the 2nd level, and the palm print had already left a deep imprint in her heart. Now, as long as she saw the patterns on the 3rd level, she would involuntarily start to cultivate according to this level. But she didn't even comprehend the 2nd level, let alone the 3rd level. After looking at it, the only result was that this part of Xuanhuan's cultivation was completely disintegrated. Xuanhuan herself must have realized that something was wrong, which was why she was so flustered and exasperated. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chu Liyue did not say a word and only continued to outline the remaining patterns. When Xuanhuan raised her head and accidentally saw it, she only felt as if someone had taken a knife and forcefully carved this pattern in her mind. Sensing that the impression in her mind was becoming more and more chaotic, Xuanhuan finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. Then she rushed toward Chu Liyue with scarlet eyes. Slut. Trying to mystify in front of this consort, you're courting death. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. He hooked his finger lightly and added the last pattern. Finally he stopped. Xuanhuan was getting closer and closer. She was about to charge over. Chu Liyue pulled with both hands. That huge pattern instantly floated over. Xuanhuan only saw a flash in front of her eyes. That strange pattern appeared in front of her again. Chu Liyue spoke softly as if he was guiding her, but also as if he was ruling. Let's see how your Ling Xiao palm is like. As soon as he finished speaking, Xuanhuan's mind exploded. Ling Xiao palm. Crack. In an instant, it was as if something had suddenly broken. As if out of control, the 2 patterns in her mind were completely mixed together. The 2nd layer of palm lines, which was deeply imprinted like a brand, instantly shattered and dissipated. Xuanhuan's body trembled and she violently spat out a mouthful of blood. She clearly felt as if something was rapidly flowing out of her body. Ling Xiao palm, Ling Xiao palm. Xuanhuan raised her eyes with difficulty and looked at the shattered palm print, only to see that the palm lines on it had completely shattered. Chu Liyue's eyes were cold and sharp. He formed a whip with his force and viciously lashed it out. Smack. That ghostly green palm print collapsed along with it. What she could give Xuanhuan back then she could take away today. Ling Xiao palm? She didn't deserve it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. But today Xuanhuan finally realized that Chu Liyue was much harder to deal with than she had expected. Anger and resentment surged in her heart, almost bursting out of Xuanhuan's chest. Her intense emotions made her crazy, and her facial features were slightly distorted. In the depths of her eyes, a dark green fire could be vaguely seen. It looked like a ferocious ghost. At this point, a clear cry was heard. Xuanhuan was shocked. She turned around and saw that the crimson gold phoenix had already broken free from the black net and was angrily rushing out. It was heading straight for her. The red fire surged and the entire space instantly turned into a sea of fire. The crimson gold phoenix's crystal-like eyes flashed with extremely cold murderous intent. Xuanhuan's entire body turned cold. It was as if she was instantly surrounded by the Grim Reaper. Danger. She hurriedly got up and ran away without thinking. But the moment she turned around, a fire suddenly attacked her. Poof! Xuanhuan was shocked. She hurriedly dodged and accidentally fell to the ground. Lowering her head, she saw that her skirt was already stained with the red fire. She hurriedly extinguished the fire. However, Dumpling had the intention to kill this time. How could she let her off so easily? The surrounding flames burned crazily, and from all directions, they rushed toward Xuanhuan to kill her. In a moment of desperation, Xuanhuan hurriedly set up a barrier around her. At the same time, she ran towards the crimson gold armor that was thrown on the ground. Even if the crimson gold armor had not officially recognized her as its owner, when she wore it, it would still be able to provide some defense. Xuanhuan was forced to the point that she had no other choice. In a state of panic, she could only think of these methods to deal with it. But just as she was about to reach the crimson gold armor, a terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the side. Xuanhuan was stunned, and a trace of fear surged in her heart. Suddenly, a black rune appeared in the void, blocking in front of Xuanhuan. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted. The fireball formed by the red flames was actually completely blocked by the black rune. With the help of the black rune, Xuanhuan successfully put on the crimson gold armor again. Touching the cold and hard armor, Xuanhuan's heart calmed down. Chu Liyue stared at the black rune and narrowed his eyes. This was Xuanhuan's true backing. Xuanhuan was protected by the barrier and finally had time to breathe. She said in her heart, "Thank you, senior." However, the other party only replied coldly, "Useless thing." Xuanhuan was reprimanded, but she didn't dare to refute. She didn't even dare to show a trace of dissatisfaction. She didn't expect that she would be forced to such a state by a mere Chu Liyue. Senior is right. It's all this junior's fault for underestimating the enemy. Even if you use your full strength, I'm afraid the situation won't be any better than now, right? That hoarse voice had a hint of mockery. Don't forget, you're now a trash who hasn't even recovered your Yuan meridian. Xuanhuan might be able to gain the upper hand in the first few moves, but as time passed, she wouldn't be able to hold on. In the end, wasn't she still being beaten up by Chu Liyue? Xuanhuan bit her lips angrily, and a trace of blood seeped out of her lips. However, her lips and teeth were already full of blood. This was not worth mentioning at all. In the end, I still have to do it personally. That voice said coldly. Xuanhuan was shocked and felt complicated. Senior, buzz. A strange buzz could be heard all of a sudden. Then, the black rune slowly flew to Xuanhuan's glabella. This time, the edge of the black rune seemed to be burning with flames and curled slightly. Before Xuanhuan could speak, there was a subtle change in her expression. Her expression quickly faded away, leaving only indifference and coldness. Her eyes also became even more scarlet. Her entire body was filled with a monstrous murderous aura. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling. Hearing her call, Dumpling, who had intended to fight head-on, quickly flew back. The next moment, Xuanhuan raised her hand and tapped lightly in the air. Boom! A violent gale spread out in all directions. The space around Chu Liyue quickly collapsed. Then, her body flew forward uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 745. Xuanhuan's hand went straight for Chu Liyue's slender neck. It was as if with a slight twist, she could break this slender and fair neck and completely take away Chu Liyue's life. Chu Liyue's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying pressure, and she couldn't move. A murderous intent flashed across Dumpling's eyes, and she immediately chased after her. Xuanhuan raised her eyes and looked at Dumpling expressionlessly. The huge net that she had just broken free from was once again blocking in front of her. Moreover, this net had clearly been repaired, and it was even more dense and difficult to deal with than before. Dumpling's speed slowed down. However, in this moment of slowing down, the distance between Chu Liyue and Xuanhuan had rapidly shortened. Xuanhuan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch Chu Liyue's creamy skin. Suddenly, a vigorous aura erupted from Chu Liyue's body. Xuanhuan's wooden expression finally cracked. She retreated in shock, but her eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. No wonder you're so arrogant. So you still have such a trump card. That aura just now was clearly above a 9th stage warrior. Chu Liyue's body actually hid such a strong warrior's strength. Although Xuanhuan's voice didn't change, her tone was different from before, as if she had changed into a different person. Without her control and threat, Chu Luiyue fell from the sky. When her feet stepped on the ground again, she let out a long breath in her heart and said gratefully, "Thank you, Taizu." She really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that situation just now. Taizu didn't say anything, but he firmly protected Chu Luiyue. Xuanhuan looked at Chu Luiyue suspiciously. Chu Luiyue also looked up at the other side. This time, both sides fell into a short silence and stalemate. The air seemed to have condensed and it was suffocating. On the surface, this was a duel between Xuanhuan and Chu Luiyue, but in reality it was no longer. Suddenly there was a fluctuation in the air. Xuanhuan immediately turned her head to look. Her expression was cold. This scene must not be seen by anyone. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly heard a sound that was neither loud nor soft. Crack. Seemed like something had broken? Xuanhuan looked down. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Chu Luiyue also saw this scene. But in reality she knew that this crack had been there for a long time. Crack. That crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The uneasiness in Chu Luiyue's heart grew stronger. She quickly summoned Dumpling. Just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck, she saw a faint green light rush out from the crack. Then the entire stone platform was filled with cracks. It began to collapse. At the same time, countless tree roots fell from above. They swept toward the two of them. Chu Luiyue quickly jumped onto Dumpling's back. However, at that moment, the entire stone platform collapsed. The faint green light lit up the entire space. Then a terrifying suction force came from below. Xuanhuan's feet were empty and she fell straight down. She was about to be devoured. However, at that moment, she suddenly grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Luiyue's side. She grabbed Chu Luiyue's ankle. Chu Luiyue wanted to defend, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the force around her. It was the same for Taizu's force. In that moment, Xuanhuan grabbed Chu Luiyue. Then she pulled fiercely. Everything happened too quickly. Before Chu Luiyue could react, she was already forcefully pulled down. Chu Luiyue raised her leg and kicked Xuanhuan fiercely. Xuanhuan's face immediately turned to the side from the kick. A few of her teeth also fell out. In her panic, she only had time to put on the pure gold sacred armor and forgot to put on the helmet. However, she quickly reacted. As long as Chu Luiyue did not hurt her head or face, she could easily take down Chu Luiyue. Enveloped by the faint green light, both of them could not use their force. They could only rely on their physical strength. Xuanhuan's eyes were fierce. She grabbed Chu Luiyue's ankle tightly and pushed hard. Chu Luiyue fell. Dumpling flapped her wings and scratched Xuanhuan's face fiercely. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Xuanhuan's face. The few scratches were shocking. They were so deep that the bones could be seen. Xuanhuan screamed and was about to think of a way to retaliate when Dumpling quickly chased after Chu Luiyue. Saving Master is more important. As for Xuanhuan, when we meet again I will definitely return the favor. Dumpling's figure followed closely behind Chu Luiyue and disappeared into the dense faint green light below. Xuanhuan hugged the tree root tightly, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Who knows what's down there? At this moment the air was torn apart. Two silhouettes walked out one after the other. It was Qinyi and Changwanzhou. The black rune on Xuanhuan's glabella instantly disappeared. The dazed expression on her face gradually faded, and she returned to her previous look filled with anger and resentment. She shuddered. Just now, was I being controlled by that person just now? She's right here, Changwanzhou was speaking when he suddenly saw the scene in front of him. Shock flashed across his eyes and his voice stopped abruptly. Qinyi reacted faster than him. When he saw the stage that was almost completely collapsing and the strange faint green light in the middle, he immediately realized that something was amiss. He quickened his steps and rushed over. In the end, he saw Xuanhuan struggling to climb up. Other than her, there was no one else around. Chu Luiyue isn't here. Qinyi's gaze finally landed on the abyss below. Other than the blinding light, he couldn't see anything. He was just standing at the edge, but he felt like he was about to be swallowed. Where is she? Changwanzhou also followed over and stared at Xuanhuan as he questioned her coldly. Xuanhuan recognized the two of them and felt a chill in her heart. However, she still forced herself to say, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Hurry and save me." Changwanzhou's voice was even colder. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Xuanhuan could only pretend that she didn't know. "What are you talking about? Who is she? I'm the only one here from start to end." Hurry, hurry and pull me up. She can't hold on for too long just by relying on her own strength. Someone must bring her out from the outside. Murderous intent appeared on Xuanhuan's face. I can clearly feel Chu Liyue's aura here. She must have been here before. Looking at Xuanhuan's haggard appearance, she clearly just went through an intense battle. Clang. Xuanhuan suddenly pulled out his sword. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly in his hands. Then he slashed at the tree root that Xuanhuan was hugging. Since Xuanhuan isn't willing to tell the truth, then I'll just kill her. Digression. It's better to be together at 6 p.m. for the rest of the time. My 5-year-old computer is barely hanging on, and the exhaust fan is so hot that you can fry an egg on it. I brought it to be repaired. Mending and mending for another 3 years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Xuanhuan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qini suddenly pressed down on Xuanhuan's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Xuanhuan's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Xuanhuan's beautiful face as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qini was simply too strong, and he suppressed Xuanhuan completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Xuanhuan couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qini's match, Xuanhuan looked up angrily. I don't believe that Qini can't tell what's going on here. Why did he stop me? It's not enough even if Xuanhuan dies 10,000 times. Qini's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions. Then he looked at Xuanhuan with a gentle expression. We'll save you first. Xuanhuan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qini said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Xuanhuan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Xuanhuan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Xuanhuan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down. Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Xuanhuan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jiang Yuqing. Yuqing? Exclaimed Xuanhuan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. Yuqing, you are finally here. Jiang Yuqing didn't notice it for a moment and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Xuanhuan's waist. Xuanhuan cried in his arms. I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me? Jiang Yuqing knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Xuanhuan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jiang Yuqing, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now he could finally relax a little. The front of Jiang Yuqing's shirt was soon soaked by Xuanhuan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him, and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jiang Yuqing rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry. When Xuanhuan saw Jiang Yuqing, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qini. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jiang Yuqing. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jiang Yuqing came and saw me planning to kill Xuanhuan. But even so, what about Chu Liyue? Xuanhuan looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jiang Yuqing hugged Xuanhuan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qini saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, Jiang Yuqing, you came quickly. Eldest young Master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us. Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's, and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Wonner's call for help, so I chased her here. Jiang Yuqing roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Xuanhuan were engaged and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you. Xuanhuan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide it a little. She didn't say anything and just hugged Jiang Yuqing even tighter as she sobbed. Qin Yi looked at the two of them nonchalantly as if he didn't have any intention of asking. I see. Jiang Yuqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, are you the only one here? Xuanhuan laid in his arms so everyone couldn't see her expression. Xuanhuan nodded hesitantly and her voice was muffled. This means, we've already dealt with Chu Luiyue? Jiang Yuqing was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Chu Luiyue had probably guessed what Xuanhuan was doing. From all aspects he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Chu Luiyue being killed by Xuanhuan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to think too much as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Xuanhuan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jiang Yuqing really came because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Xuanhuan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luiyue, Jiang Yuqing looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. Weird. If Xuanhuan wanted to kill Chu Luiyue, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qin Yi spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight and immediately understood what Qin Yi meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow? What do you want to do? When Xuanhuan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luiyue, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just... Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Xuanhuan away as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Xuanhuan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. Shock, horror. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Xuanhuan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face? Xuanhuan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate, so he quickly took a step forward. Your face, how did you get this injury? His words were sincere, and his expression was anxious as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Xuanhuan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face. Especially a princess from the imperial family like Xuanhuan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face? with a disfigured face. Who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Xuanhuan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Xuanhuan sneered, "You didn't ask me if it hurt, but asked me how I got this injury first?" Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now he didn't take any precautions and most of his attention wasn't on Xuanhuan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Xuanhuan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Xuanhuan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you," Xuanhuan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation and comforting words. In the past, Xuanhuan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Xuanhuan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming. However, in the past 2 years she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold on to a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired, and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience and persuaded, these are all wounds. These are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal. Previously Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. You can't see anything. Xuanhuan didn't think much of it and listened to his words as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now. I will never forget it. Qinyi was too lazy to care about the two of them and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. Qinyi glanced at him. Just stay there. Even I find it dangerous. Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over? Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qinyi. I know my limits. If Qinyi went over, he might be able to bring Chu Liwei back, but if I go, I might just become a burden. Xuanhuan glanced over from the corner of her eye and saw Qinyi walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qinyi acted like he didn't hear her. Xuanhuan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. It seems like Chu Liwei fell down there. That aura is very dangerous and Chu Liwei should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid. Rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qinyi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qinyi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qinyi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground, and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right, and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and some were disciples from other clans. Qinyi knitted his brows. It seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong? Even I can't resist it at all. Big brother. This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qinyi turned around and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qinyi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother her?" Qinyi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Liwei? I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now. He immediately saw Big Brother here and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Luiyue wasn't here. We've already found Xuanhuan and Jianghu, so why is Her Highness missing? Qin Yi's expression dulled. We haven't found her yet. You haven't found her? How can this be? Lei Laosi suddenly thought of something and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings and carefully scanned everyone's faces. No, it's still not. Her Highness is actually not here. Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet and walked to the other side. At this moment, Xuanhuan's voice was heard. Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already? Digression. The fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Xuanhuan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laosi looked over. This time he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Xuanhuan. However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Xuanhuan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Xuanhuan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time, Qin Yi didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Xuanhuan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so. He said excitedly, Your Highness. We finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time. Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Xuanhuan and Jianghu respectively. Your Highness, eldest young master. Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain. Xuanhuan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time? Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Xuanhuan and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down, Xuanhuan was not very clear about this. So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work. Xuanhuan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Luiyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Xuanhuan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Xuanhuan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light and his movements were extremely small, Xuanhuan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed, and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi and Chu Luiyue seemed to have a good relationship. Do you know what happened? Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beasts for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Luiyue. It's probably related to this matter. It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Xuanhuan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Luiyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible. Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Xuanhuan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past, and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground, and it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go. The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Luyu? Luyu, where are you? Mu Hongyu Yi ran and the rest were looking for Chu Luyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Luyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu. Miss Chu. You guys search here, we'll go over there. Okay. Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luyue. Xuanhuan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Xuanhuan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luyue's face was filled with astonishment. This is glazed barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glazed barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glazed barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. Yes, was an armor. With such a tight fit, other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first, she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom. At her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently. Because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luyue blinked her eyes, and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is, as if to confirm her guess, the surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new, and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy. It perfectly fit Chu Luyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, she thought that it had been taken away by Xuanhuan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Luyue looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged, and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Liyue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly like the wind with the wind, everything else, it was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize its Chu Liyue never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize xuanhuan as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. But how did it come about? Chu Liyue recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glazed barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glazed barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Liyue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier. But this was also the pure gold sacred armor. Seemed like, after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glazed barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one, and in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Liyue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rong Xiu to play chess and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu said that the glazed barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Liyue didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glazed barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzheng competition, and entered the Tianling God realm that she finally realized that this glazed barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Liyue was curious, she didn't think too much about it because the situation was urgent. Later on he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of the long yuan sword? Although the glazed barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glazed barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rong Xiu, Chu Liyue mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rong Xiu. Does he know something? Thousands of miles away. In the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. I finally won against you, Your Highness. Rong Xiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually, as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rong Xiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. You. Did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiu, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it, okay? At the start, Rong Xiu went easy on him very obviously. Later on he gradually hit it very well. If Your Highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, "Not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to this sword dance in the vast sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."